Deputy Iron.
Thank you, sir. It's just to remind members, obviously we'll be breaking for some sandwiches at 5:30.
Yes.
And they have been laid on in the Ivy Foster room downstairs. I understand there's some crisps as well and mince pies. I hope everyone can join us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
No mulled wine?
That's 8 o'clock. Returning to the debate on the 18th Amendment, the next person to speak is Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to really pick up on a point that the Treasury Minister made earlier in the debate. She reminded us that the Chief Statistician's bid was for a business administration officer. And I think that was important because as a number of members have tried to suggest that by not accepting this amendment, ministers were by some way interfering with the work of the Statistics Office and with its independence. And I suppose I would have a lot of sympathy for that point of view were it a statistician that was being asked for. But the fact that it is a business administration officer, of which I understand we have one or two, I won't say any more than that, sir, in the Cabinet Office already, doing various work across departments, means for me that this is not about the independence of the Statistics Office at all. This is picking up on something which Deputy Stevenson said, which is really if we are to drive efficiencies and if we are to get more from the resources that we have, and I was criticised in an earlier debate by one of my coalition colleagues for keeping budgets down. I was accused of presiding over austerity. Of course, I would remind that coalition colleague, sir, that had we not kept budgets down, COVID could in fact have bankrupted us, as it seems to have done with some other economies. But let's not drag that into this debate, sir. Otherwise, you'll say we're breaching standing orders. The point is that if we are to get a grip on public finances and the cost of administration, this approach that the Chief Minister is bringing to supporting the statistics unit through existing resources, in this case business administration officers, to me seems one that the broader Assembly should support, because without it, it's very difficult to see that we can ever deliver government more efficiently and more effectively, or ever seek to control expenditure moving forward. The other point I would make, sir, is that some members have referenced the annual report, and they praised the statistics unit for the annual report. Of course, they don't need me to remind them that the annual report was provided from within existing resources, and they did not need further resources for that annual report. And so for me, sir, this is a simple decision. It isn't interfering with the independence of the statistics unit's work, but what it is doing is using existing resource more efficiently and therefore more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Wilson, remotely. Deputy Wilson?
Thank you, sir. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm pleased to follow Deputy Gorst. However, some of the points that I'd like to make are about the issues relating to capacity, and I accept this is not about the professional advice, but it's about capacity, and I don't think that the case has been made sufficiently well enough by government to deny any further capacity on this function. I think where countries lack strong independent statistical leadership do make poorer decisions, but that's contingent not just only on the professional advice of a statistician, but all of the team that go into producing that data and that information. And in that regard, it's not a luxury that we should consider it as. It's an essential part, as Deputy Miles has said, about modern governance. The questions I'm asking myself are just how much more administrative burden can we place on the statistical unit to deliver the kind of information and the kind of data that we are seeking. We've just made, over the last couple of days, decisions about childcare fees, mortgage interest relief, and indeed the impact of the budget. And the question is, who's going to analyse this? And what capacity requirement is there to do that? And I don't think we have got any idea or any assessment of what government have identified as the need for its statistical support going forward. But clearly the statistical unit have, and they've done the research, and they know that what they're being asked to do is that they can't do it without some further additional support. So it sort of makes me feel that when government are arguing against this amendment, what they're really saying is that we can manage without rigour, and that we can manage without accountability, and we can manage without, the inconvenience of the facts, really. And all I would say is that, would these be the questions that big organisations like the OECD or the European Union would be asking itself when it's looking to identify what its capacity requirements are to produce the data it produces. So if ministers believe that we can run complex services in this island, from health planning to economic forecasting, without the capacity that's needed to provide independent statistical advice, then in my view, sir, I think they don't really understand the value of the evidence. They don't understand what it takes to generate that evidence. They don't understand what it needs to test and validate that evidence. And they seem to prefer a world in which basic information satisfies, and perhaps maybe some evidence is easier to ignore. I think the argument that officers can't just absorb the function, or that they can absorb the function, I don't think that's a credible argument to put forward, because I'd like to hear from the government, how do they know that? And I do think that it's effectively short-sighted. So as an Assembly, sir, I think we do need to insist on being provided with independence and professionalism. And I don't want the statistics unit to be doing any shortcuts on that basis. I think it would be wrong to get them to manage without the capacity to provide good evidence, good information. And we should protect this function from any sort of political pressure to minimise its role and purpose. One of the things that we are quite proud about, and we've heard in a number of speeches, is that we are allegedly trying to transform, and we're trying to invest in data-driven reforms. But I would argue to undermine the very foundation that makes that possible is just a massive contradiction. If anything, for me, sir, we should be strengthening our statistical capacity. We shouldn't be dismantling it. This isn't about personalities or structures. It's about what kind of government we want to be and how we want to evidence our work. I'll leave it at there. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon Deputy Miles to reply. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir, and I'd like to thank all the members for speaking. I want to refer to the comments that were made first of all by Deputy Miller and latterly by Deputy Gorst, because I have to say, frankly, I am very, very confused. The business case that we were presented with in a submission from the Chief Statistician talks about administrative support for the statistics law amendments. It does not talk about an administrative support officer. What the bid is for, and certainly the submission that we have received, and I have mentioned it in my speech, and it is detailed on page 5 of the scrutiny panel report, is for the production of a separate annual report and accounts detailing the performance and functions of the Chief Statistician, producing the strategy for the Jersey Statistics System and formal coordination of the Jersey Statistics System, including secretarial functions for the Statistical Producers Group, and conducting the ordinary programme of reviews and occasional extraordinary reviews of Tier 1 statistics. Those are the requirements that are set out in the law. Nowhere have we seen, and nowhere are we suggesting, that the Chief Statistician be provided with an administrative support officer. And indeed, further on his submission, and it's a shame we can't be here till midnight because I would be prepared to read all of it out. He says, Tier 1 statistics may need support from international subject matter experts, e.g. from other national statistics officers in the relevant statistical area. Part of the business case was to provide non-staff budget to cover such costs if required. I think we need to be quite clear. The Chief Statistician is not asking for an administrative support officer. He is talking about the administrative support functions that are clearly delineated in the legislation that this Assembly passed in 2024. And I'm frankly really surprised that the Council of Ministers didn't notice that when they were preparing to reject this amendment. So, sir, members, this amendment is about nothing more and nothing less than ensuring that the statutory duties this Assembly has already approved can actually be delivered. What we're asking for reflects the financial implications to implement the law, and if members want to have a look at page 7 of our amendment, it clearly sets out in the table what those financial commitments are. But I think at its heart, this debate has clearly exposed a deeper issue, and other members have alluded to that. The Council of Ministers appears increasingly uncomfortable with laws and regulations that require sustained commitment and accountability. The Chief Minister said, I'm pleased with the output. It's satisfactory. Well, it probably was satisfactory until the new regulations came into 2024, but it's not satisfactory now. The Chief Statistician has been clear that he does not have the resources to fulfil statutory obligations. The Chief Minister talked about this amendment as baking in inefficiency, observing legal obligations that actually the Chief Minister brought to the Assembly himself can hardly be described as baking in inefficiency. So our role as an Assembly is not to pass legislation only for it to be selectively resourced, selectively implemented, or quietly sidelined when it becomes inconvenient. A government that doesn't like regulation is still bound by the law. Preference cannot override statutes. If ministers really object to the obligations created by this Assembly, they should return with amendments, not undermine the legislation through under-resourcing. We cannot allow a pattern in which laws are welcomed on paper but withheld in practice. For the credibility of our legislative process and the integrity of our system of governance, we need to ensure that when this Assembly enacts, the government delivers. And for the integrity of our evidence base and for the credibility of our own laws, I ask members to support this amendment, and I call for the appel.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Now ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce the amendment has been rejected. 18 votes pour, 25 votes contra. Yes.
Those members voting for the Connotab of St Clement and St Mary and deputies Southern, Tadier, Doublé, Gardner, Moore, Ore, Wall, Miles, Scott, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Jean Kovac, Alex Curtis, Stevenson and Wilson, and those members voting contre, the Connotab of St Helier, St Brelard, Trinity, St John, Grouville, St Juan and St Xavier, and deputies Luce, Morel, Lahegara, Ayer, Rob Ward, Owls, Farnham, Mezek, Coles, Feltham, Rose Binet, Miller, Howell, Tom Binet, Ferry, Barbara Ward, Andrews and Gorst.
I'll move to the 17th amendment lodged by the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. I'll ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B12. After the words are set out in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 42, after table 9, there should be inserted the words, within the revenue head of expenditure for the Cabinet Office, funding for Children's Commissioner should be increased by £61,000 in 2026 through reallocation of other departmental expenditure within the Cabinet Office. This should be reflected in the Cabinet Office Service Level Analysis Table for 2026, contained within the annex accompanying the report, R139 of 2025, entitled Part 2, Heads of Expenditure Financial Information for the Cabinet Office.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I think the Corporate Services Panel amendments this time are following a theme. And this amendment is brought by the Corporate Services Panel. Sir, following our review of the proposed budget and the presentation of our scrutiny report, this amendment seeks to reinstate essential funding for the Children's Commissioner and ensures compliance with the statutory obligations of the Commissioner for Children and Young People Jersey Law 2019. This amendment is not a political device, it is not a negotiating tactic, it is not an attempt to reopen the budget. It is about whether the Assembly will meet the legal duties it has already placed upon itself. The law is clear. The Commissioner must be provided with adequate financial and administrative resources to carry out statutory functions, not minimal, not conditional, not dependent on goodwill or discretionary support, adequate. The Government has not demonstrated that this standard will be met if the proposed savings proceed. And that is the fundamental problem. Duties remain unchanged whilst resources are reduced. Sir, earlier this year in a hearing, I asked the Chief Minister whether the Office of the Childcare Commissioner in Jersey budget would be reduced. He said, to be clear, there are no plans to reduce the budget. I asked myself what has changed. The Council of Ministers has not shown that the Commissioner's legal duties have been reduced, that the scope of vulnerability in Jersey has decreased, or that children's needs have diminished. So members must ask themselves the unavoidable question: how can the same statutory work be done to the same standard with fewer resources? It cannot. This amendment merely reinstates funding that enables the Commissioner to fulfil the core statutory purpose of promoting and protecting the rights of all children and young people in Jersey. The need for the office derives directly from the independent Jersey Care Inquiry, and maintaining its capacity is integral to safeguarding the very lessons that inquiry taught us. The panel received detailed submissions from the Commissioner describing the impact of the proposed cuts. These concerns are neither speculative nor exaggerated. They reflect statutory realities. The Commissioner is clear that this is not a matter to be negotiated bilaterally between one minister and the Office of the Children's Commissioner. The law requires that adequacy of resources be determined by the Assembly itself, this Assembly, not an individual minister who holds legal responsibility to ensure sufficient funding. The operational consequences are significant. The Commissioner has confirmed that whilst the office might still deliver the minimum level of its statutory functions, the proposed cut will prevent the initiation of any new work in 2026 in key areas such as education, mental health, youth justice and children's social care. The consequences of that are stark. Reduced involvement of children and young people in critical consultations, weaker and less robust advice to scrutiny and other agencies, limited ability to commission legal research or expert input, constrained capacity to respond to emerging issues in 2026, regardless of urgency or risk. This is not a trimming of the budget, this is a hollowing out. The Commissioner has emphasised that without a secure budget, projects on educational inequalities, mental health, work that must begin well in advance, cannot be commissioned. Waiting until Q2 or Q3 of next year for potential additional funding is futile. Without core funding, preparatory staff time becomes wasted resource. And there's a further systemic risk. Delayed commissioning compresses timelines to the point when December 26 will replicate exactly the problem we face now, an inability to complete work streams or even begin them, and a knock-on effect that consumes the entire 2027 allocation before the year has even begun. The Commissioner summarised the central question quite bluntly. Can the office operate on a reduced budget? The answer, yes, but only at the most basic level, meeting the bare minimum of statutory duties. And the Commissioner is equally clear about what that means, sir. States members would be voting to reduce Jersey's ambition for children's rights, to limit independent oversight to its minimum statutory expression, and to weaken the island's only human rights body for children. Given the many public statements from states members, including ministers, emphasising the support for the Commissioner and commitment to children's rights, such a position should not be acceptable. The care inquiry taught us that oversight is not a luxury. It is the safeguard that prevents systemic failure. A Commissioner without secure funding is not independent. Independence relies on structure, not sentiment. The statutory office that must request ad hoc funding from ministers cannot credibly challenge the same departments it relies upon for its operational survival. And it's vital that members remember one constitutional point that has been largely overlooked in this debate. The Office of the Children's Commissioner was created by this Assembly, by us, sir, not by ministers. It exists to scrutinise the executive, not to be resourced at the executive's convenience. The Council of Ministers does not determine the scope of work, the scale of its mandate, or the level of funding needed to maintain its independence. That responsibility rests solely with the Assembly, because this Assembly created the office as a safeguard, precisely to ensure that government actions affecting children are subject to independent challenge. Com has not explained how independence is preserved when the Commissioner cannot commission research, seek legal advice, or initiate major work streams without discretionary approval. Independence cannot be conditional. The Commissioner also noted that the government's reference to one fewer FTE over 3 years has already materialised. That post has already been removed. The office is operating with a staff of 8 rather than the 9 originally envisioned. The proposed saving is therefore not an efficiency measure, it's a service reduction. I think members must ask what signal is sent when the smallest statutory office in the island is repeatedly asked to absorb cuts while carrying one of the most sensitive responsibilities in public life. What message does that send to children, especially those who have experienced harm? What about the children at La Passerelle and the story that we saw in the Jersey Evening Post? We have children in prison. What message does it send about our commitment to the care inquiry? What message does it send about whether we truly believe in the rights we say we champion? This amendment doesn't increase overall public spending, it reallocates funds within the same head of expenditure. £61,000 is negligible within the Cabinet Office, but it's transformational for the Children's Commissioner. She's not asking for new money, just the restitution of the amount she says she needs. And it's the difference between a functioning watchdog and a constrained one. I want to close by addressing directly the suggestion from the Council of Ministers that the Office of the Children's Commissioner is over-resourced. That assertion doesn't withstand scrutiny. The Office of the Children's Commissioner is one of the smallest statutory offices in Jersey, operating with a team already reduced from 9 posts to 8. It oversees some of the most complex and sensitive areas of public responsibility: safeguarding, youth justice, mental health, education, children's social care, and the lived experience of vulnerable children. To characterise this level of resource as excessive fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the role. Independent oversight is not measured by output volume alone. It's measured by the ability to challenge, to investigate, to consult widely, to commission expert analysis, and to respond rapidly when children's rights are at risk. And these functions require capacity, continuity, and security of funding. They cannot be delivered on goodwill, part-time support, or a residual budget. The Commissioner has been very clear. The Office can operate on a reduced budget, but only at the most basic level. And that means fewer inquiries, fewer consultations with children, fewer interventions in emerging areas of concern, and a less robust advice service. What the Council of Ministers frames as over-resourced is the minimum level required to maintain independence, uphold the care inquiry's recommendations, and protect children's rights in law and in practice. Oversight is not a cost that should be trimmed. It's a constitutional safeguard entrusted by the Assembly to an independent office, and weakening it undermines children's rights, but also the authority of this Assembly itself. So, if members believe that children's rights matter, that the lessons of the care inquiry still guide us, and that independent scrutiny strengthens rather than burdens government, then they should reject the narrative that the Office of the Children's Commissioner is over-resourced. It is not. It is already operating leanly, efficiently, and under sustained pressure. What it lacks is not discipline, but assurance. So, sir, for the protection of children, the integrity of our oversight system, and the credibility of our own legislation, and bearing in mind that we are all corporate parents, I urge ministers to support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. And I rise to share mine and the Minister for Children and Families' will to find an appropriate level of funding for the Office of the Children's Commissioner. And I'm glad that the mover of this proposition spoke to the comments paper, because just to put this into context, the current budget is £954,000, sir. So this reduction is 61,000 on that £954,000, which is still in place, sir. And there are 8 members of staff, which I do agree has been cut. But the Council of Ministers believes that this is sufficient for the Commission to deliver on its important and independent work. So, as the Assembly is aware, the Children's Commissioner is an independent champion who plays a crucial role in protecting, empowering and giving a voice to and promoting and protecting the human rights of children and young people in Jersey. In our view, the work of the Commissioner is not optional. It is a core part of our safeguarding system. Children cannot advocate for themselves in the political arena. They cannot hold government services to account. The Commissioner is in place to fill that gap and to ensure children's rights are upheld, their voices are heard and considered in the decisions that we make. We recognise that safeguarding our children's rights is a duty and an investment in better childhood outcomes for our young people. The independence of this office is one of its strengths. Young people need someone to speak to on their behalf, someone able to challenge government and use systems to help shine a light on issues affecting our children so that we can support them. But that independence only has value if we support it with the resources required to do the job properly. In the context of the need to produce savings and budget reductions across a wide range of departments and sectors, I am satisfied that the budget that is being allocated to Commissioner fulfils that objective. I have reached out to the Commissioner to better understand the possible impact of this reduction in their budget. And initially, she stated that there were 2 projects that would have commenced in 2026, which were scheduled for the middle of the year, which may now not be undertaken or may be delayed. In the interim period, the Commissioner has got back to me with more detailed advice, but those were the main reasons for contesting this reduction in the budget. So, in the comments paper rejecting this amendment, I've explained that if these projects are deemed essential, there is provision to assist the Commissioner in finding a way forward and commencing these work streams in the most cost-effective manner, and without, importantly, compromising the independence of the Office of the Children's Commissioner. So I wish to send a clear message today that this Assembly values the voices of children, we respect their rights, and we will continue to provide funding at an appropriate level for the Office of the Commissioner to continue to work on their behalf. And so I've just looked recently and I noticed that the Commissioner is updating their website. And of course, all organisations need to have a good shop front window. But if the old website was functional and was interactive and seemed to do everything it needed to do. I understand there is a need to update websites, but I would argue that if this cut is so essential, where is money being spent on a website which is far swishier than the previous one that was in place? So I ask members, therefore, to reject this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased that the Corporate Services Panel has brought this amendment. The Children Education and Home Affairs Panel frequently and regularly consults with the Children's Commissioner. There are concerns that children are still not being properly considered in Jersey, as I detailed in my recent speech on the online harms review. Jersey is aligned to international obligations on children's rights, which we must keep in mind. And those of us who attended the recent film screening on World Children's Day will have seen firsthand some of the essential work done by the Children's Commissioner's Office. So I repeat Deputy Miles's comment that we are all corporate parents and should support the work of the Children's Commissioner.
Thank you, Deputy. Conataba St Mary.
Thank you, sir. In general terms, this proposition follows that earlier in the week we debated on, brought by the Environment Scrutiny Panel. The thrust of the proposition is the same. That panel, the Environment Panel, were concerned that without the extra funding or return of the funding, we would be in breach of our statutory obligations. This is more of the same, I suggest. So it is not for us to decide at this late stage, well, we've asked them to do too much. The Children's Commissioner has certain obligations to perform. She has demonstrated to the panel that she's sorely pressed to fulfil those without the extra funding, and I think it ill behoves us to withdraw this funding or sanction withdrawal of it in the context of knowing that resources or the services will not be as great as islanders would reasonably expect in view of previous decisions like that of the care panel. Again, in the context of the early debate regarding the environmental scrutiny panel's proposal, I referred to the question of the dogs law, which only a few weeks ago was brought before the Assembly, and the panel then was put in the uncomfortable position of agreeing the principle, but not being able to endorse it wholeheartedly because it contained enforcement provisions which basically government was not in position to provide. The state's vet in her favour said that she was not introducing new provisions. There were those already in the law, and which did bring out the stark reality that we are in danger of cutting funds, preventing us to comply with our obligations. As I say, sir, there is a similarity between the two, and I urgently request members to look favourably on the proposition so that we can do what the public expect us to do and provide the Commissioner with the appropriate funds to fulfil the service which the island as a whole is entitled to expect. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Gardner.
I'm raising to ask actually a question from the Treasury Minister or the Chief Minister, and I'm rising as a chair of the Public Accounts Committee because we are in the beginning of drafting our final report on arm's length organisations and grant-funded bodies, including office holders. And office, the Children Commissioner is part of our review. The submission is online and we are looking across all commissioners. So personally, because I'm in the middle of the review, abstaining. I would like to ask government, Treasury Minister, the Chief Minister, have they had meetings with statutory advisory panels as adult advisory panel, and the main one is the audit and risk advisory panel for the Office of the Children Commissioner, and was any discussion held where, because this panel responsible for the risks for the office and also budget constraint, internal accounting process, how they deliver value for money. And actually, to be honest, everyone can see the submissions online from different bodies. We wrote to most of them. And I think it was one of the most detailed submissions which will present how they're ensuring and following public finance effectiveness in their processes and what they would deliver and what are their KPIs. So my question to the government, before this decision, have you met this advisory panel and what was presented to you?
Thank you, Deputy Kovacs.
Thank you, sir. I only want to say that based on what Deputy Catherine Curtis said, that we're all corporate parents and we have a duty to support this. I'll be in support of this, but I also want to just mention that I might not be here for the vote in case it comes before, because I'll have to go for a doctor appointment at 3:30. Thank you.
Anyone else speak on this amendment? No one else. Deputy Renouf?
Yes, I do. Because this amendment is actually one which I perhaps care about most of all in this debate on the budget. And yet my frustration is that it involves such a tiny, tiny sum. Savings of £61,000. A very small sum of money for the government, but a very significant amount of money for the Commissioner. The government says 61,000 isn't much out of its budget of 900,000, but as the report makes clear, the Children's Commissioner has already absorbed £139,000 of cuts in the last 3 years. And that doesn't take into account inflation. This is an office that has been trimmed and trimmed already. She has already lost a member of staff. So the government is unambiguously saying they want to spend less money on the Children's Commissioner and quite considerably less once inflation and the multi-year nature of the cuts is taken into account. It isn't absolutely clear on whether it wants the Children's Commissioner to do less or whether it expects the Commissioner to do the same amount of work with less resource. It should make clear what its view is. Which of those two? The Council of Ministers' view, I think, is summed up in its rather haughty second paragraph of the report when it says, the draft budget provides the Office of the Children's Commissioner with a budget of £954,000 and 8 FTE staffing, which the Council of Ministers deems sufficient to deliver its important independent advocacy work. It does not say on what basis its magisterial deeming is based. Again, the government should answer this question. It is so very similar to other cuts that we have discussed. There is no actual assessment of why ministers believe the cuts can be made. No risk assessment. So I challenge the government, who've been notably quiet so far on this, to answer these questions. On what basis does it deem the budget to be sufficient? We certainly didn't hear it from the Assistant Minister, I'm afraid. What work has it done to convince itself? Convince itself, because these are legal obligations. What work has it done to convince itself that the budget is sufficient? What actual work? What meetings held? What analysis of the Commissioner's budget has it undertaken? Some detail, please. Because the Commissioner is absolutely crystal clear that the Council of Ministers is wrong. She will be able to do less. The report for the proposition provides the detail clearly and it's precisely spelled out, and Deputy Miles referenced it. Therefore, there is an implicit judgment in the government's case that they think the Commissioner is wrong. That is why it is important that the government clearly states the basis of their view. They think the Commissioner is wrong. Why? Not deemed, why? I am disappointed that less than 7 years after the formal establishment of the Children's Commissioner, its funding is already being eroded. The arguments advanced by the Assistant Minister were weak. He repeated that he believed that the Commission was well funded. I'm sorry, but citing a new website as an example of profligacy is frankly pathetic. And the Chief Minister, I hope, will explain why he has changed his mind compared to the assurance he gave the scrutiny panel this summer. It does feel to me that there's already a certain amount of fatigue around the role of the Office of the Children's Commissioner. The government argues that it is still fully committed to the role, and of course it would. But the failure to provide any evidence to support their cuts to the budget shows a fundamental lack of respect, not just to the Office of the Children Commissioner, but to this Assembly, which has the statutory duty that Deputy Miles has mentioned. And I want to put this in a bigger context, because it is interesting that the Chief Executive spoke about Jersey as a safe haven in his speech about a year ago. He argued that Jersey's glory days had been built on investment, built on Jersey being a safe haven for business with a light touch regulatory environment. It was an interesting idea that I think deserved wider consideration, but at the time, I took issue with one aspect of it. He cast the idea of safe haven very much in business terms, a safe haven for investment where the rule of law can be relied on, low taxes, less regulation, stable economy. But there was a key omission, a real howler. Because during those halcyon days for business, the terrible truth is that Jersey was not a safe haven. Not for hundreds of vulnerable children. And we learned the full awful extent of just how hollow the notion of a safe haven was when the Care Inquiry reported. I support the concept of a safe haven, but for it to have any meaning, it must be a safe haven for everyone, and in particular, the most vulnerable. So let us remind ourselves why we need a properly funded commissioner. It was the very first recommendation of the Care Inquiry, because the inquiry revealed in agonising detail the betrayal of children and young people, and in particular, it conveyed the brutally clear message that over many decades, children and young people were not heard. That the political establishment for many decades did not prioritise the interests of children. Vulnerable people were not visible in our society. Their suffering was not recognised, and it was not acted on. The Commissioner's role was created to help correct that situation and to ensure that from now on, things would be different. Children would have a voice, and the Office of the Children's Commissioner would have powers to intervene on children's behalf. And it's worth noting en passant how well established the role is in multiple other jurisdictions as well. The role is a recognition of the simple fact that it is harder for children to make themselves heard. Their rights are often not treated as seriously as the rights of adults, and it is a reflection of the exceptionally unequal power relationships that come into play when children confront authority. The then Chief Minister, Deputy Gorst, welcomed the establishment of the Commissioner when he accepted all the recommendations of the care inquiry. I'm committed to ensuring this role is independent and will support the most appropriate legislative arrangements that will enable this, he said. I took his words at face value, and I believe he believes in them. He was passionate. I am grateful to him for his deep commitment to learning the lessons of the care inquiry and for establishing the role of the Children's Commissioner. But we disagree on what commitment to that role looks like in practice. A commissioner cannot be truly independent if each year they face having to justify their role to the government in order to secure funding. If, in order to do the extra work that Deputy Ferret referred to, they have to go cap in hand to the government in order to make it happen. The government has not identified where the Commissioner should make her savings or come up with any justification for their statement that savings can be made. Whether the government likes it or not, the practical effect of their action is her wings are being clipped. Deputy Mezek was also exceptionally passionate at the time the Commissioner was established. He was both chair of the scrutiny panel and when the first Commissioner was appointed, and then the Minister who formally created the role. Again, I am profoundly grateful to him for all his work. And again, my disagreement is about whether the Minister's actions today are actually, in practice, consistent with backing the role as was originally intended. Speaking when he was Minister and establishing the role, he said, number 5, that's a reference to the clause in the law, it has got to have adequate resources. It has got to have adequate resources. And part 2 of the draft law identifies the responsibility of the states to appropriately fund the Children's Commissioner in order that the Commissioner can fulfil the functions set out in this draft law. And this is indeed what the law says. The states, not the government, the states must ensure that the Commissioner is provided with such financial and administrative resources and other support, etc., as Deputy Miles has said. So the question remains, does the government truly believe that this cut to the Commissioner's budget allows the Commissioner to fulfil her functions as the law says we must? I heard a mutter from my left here during Deputy Miles' speech to the effect that she's got plenty of money. And if they do believe this, what is the factual basis for this belief? Not a general, they should be able to save money, but a specific response to the Commissioner's clearly argued case. As things stand, the government is saying that it is happy for the Commissioner to take on no new work, unless, of course, she comes cap in hand and asks for them and she can make a good enough case and so on. But this is a decision for us, not the government. At the time the Commissioner was introduced, there was absolute clarity that the Commissioner's role needed to be independent of government and it needed to have adequate resources. There was also agreement on the budget that was required. And yet the clear conclusion that has to be drawn from the government's cut to the budget is that they now consider that the role was overfunded when it was set up. That is the only conclusion that can be drawn. Unless we're arguing that the Commissioner now has less work to do. But I do think we should remind ourselves why the role of Commissioner is just as vital as it ever was. A few weeks ago, I asked a written question about serious case reviews and rapid reviews that have been conducted under the auspices of the Safeguarding Partnership Board over the last 10 years. In the case of children, there have been 11 serious case reviews and 7 rapid reviews. That may sound a bit dry, so let me put some flesh on the bones. Jersey serious case reviews are triggered when a child dies or is seriously harmed due to maltreatment, neglect, serious sexual or organised abuse. We're still getting those. Then there are rapid reviews. They are conducted when there is a serious incident for a child defined as abuse or neglect of a child is known or suspected by a safeguarding partner or relevant provider, and either A, the child has died or has been seriously harmed. We've had 7 of those, 11 of the first category. So we've had 18 cases that fit into those. roughly since the care inquiry reported. We don't know the details. Most of the reports aren't published to preserve privacy. Sir, we are still not in a safe place for vulnerable children. You only have to look at news reports to see how many issues young people are dealing with or that are affecting young people. And again, Deputy Miles outlined some of them. And that is just one aspect of the work of the Commissioner. The law provides a long list of duties. The care inquiry report remains as relevant as it ever was, not only a testament to the appalling abuses of the past, but also a guide as to how to avoid abuses developing in the future. And a key part of that is independent oversight from outside, because perhaps the central lesson of the care inquiry was that we had cut ourselves off from the outside world. We were too isolated. The Commissioner plays an absolutely critical role in performing that function. In fact, an unwritten part of the Commissioner's role is to make us uncomfortable. It is to look where we are not looking, ask questions we are not asking or answering, provoke debates we may not be keen on having, and expose hard truths. The Children's Commissioner has very clearly said that she cannot perform her functions if this budget is cut in this way. She's specified exactly what she will not be able to do. The only real interpretation of the government's resistance to the panel amendment is that they do not believe the Commissioner. So I hope again that the Minister will clarify, does the government not believe the Children's Commissioner? And if they don't, what evidence do they have to support their view? I believe the Commissioner. I take very seriously our responsibilities to support the Commissioner. I think the government's opposition to this amendment has a little whiff of a disciplining message. A general principle, not a specific case. I say again, on what basis did the government decide to make this cut? Do they not believe the Commissioner? And if so, what bits of what she has said she can't do they actually think she can? And on what basis do they think that? The sum involved is pitiful. It is a cut to make a point. Sir, it is the wrong point to be making. The point we should be making is that we still strongly support the work of the Children's Commissioner, that she has put forward a well-evidenced case in contrast to the government's casual dismissal, and on that basis, we should do the right thing.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I don't think this debate really is about whether we agree or not vulnerable children should be protected, or whether children should be supported, whether we have statutory obligations or not. And I don't think that it really serves this debate to be virtue signalling on the desire to protect children and to advance protection and to protect their needs. I believe that what this debate really is about is a concept called right sizing and proportionality in terms of the budgeting for the Children's Commissioner. And I agree with maybe, Deputy Renouf, if the council ministers had actually set out some comparative numbers for fee earners and full-time employees and budgets for some of the other operations that we have in the island, things might have been a bit clearer. And whilst I've been listening to Deputy Renouf, I was looking at some of these numbers just in terms of comparisons of Children Commissioner officers elsewhere. I've been looking at Ireland, that's actually, previous Children's Commission. And I want to say, I actually respect our current Children's Commissioner a lot. I think she's incredibly competent. But I know she came from Ireland before, where they currently have 40 staff for 1.23 million children. That's about 3.3 staff per 100,000. Wales, that's... and actually, they have, I believe, about 21 staff, I think. And that works out about 3.66 per thousand. Jersey only has population of 100,000. And if we were going to start doing all this in proportion, we'd actually find we didn't even have one. I was actually using some other figures, and I've actually came to 4 staff if it was proportionate. But this is the actual point. I think it's incredibly, it's quite easy for anybody to say, we need this, we need this, we need this. But then when you actually look at how you are resourcing yourself, the numbers for whom you're resourcing, and whether that really does represent fair proportionality, given the small size of the island, there are different matters to be considered and thought of. And how do you sweat your assets more? How might you organise yourself more? Another comparison I have, because this is actually my area, was just looking at the Jersey Cyber Security Centre, which has 7 full-time fee earners to protect the cyber security and advanced cyber security interest in the island. That's funded at just over £1 million, which you look at the actual current budget for the Children's Commission. I think we've got about 954,000, so it's close to that. It's going to be, I think it's going from 937k to about 954k. But you have these kind of comparisons to actually think of. So I am very, the one thing that Jonathan Reniff has said, it's just £61,000. I come from a generation where you have to count the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. So I remain, much as I support and, and really believe that the intent of the, of having a Children's Commissioner is admirable. It could well be that, as Deputy Reniff said, maybe the office was over-resourced from the beginning, and maybe more work has to be done looking at these figures and actually how we most efficiently serve children in this community. So, and I don't believe that this amendment necessarily produces the solution. I think there is more work to be done, and it would just simply be relying on one person's estimate based on an experience of a much bigger office and a different way of operating. Perhaps there's more discussions to be had about how a result can be got in a different way. So I won't be supporting this amendment, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I was hoping to follow Deputy Reniff. I thought it was an excellent speech, one of the best that I've heard in this budget so far, reminding us about the children of this island whose rights we should have at the heart of every decision that we're making. And I have to say, I was really disappointed to see that speech described as virtue signalling. I think that was really not bordering on unparliamentary, but certainly a very undignified and disheartening thing to hear from one of our members. And what Deputy Scott did mention about the budgets, I've done some research myself, and yes, when you compare to other jurisdictions, Jersey is putting a bit more money per child into the Office of the Children's Commissioner. But those numbers are not really comparable because, for 2 reasons. The first being that we are a standalone jurisdiction with our own parliament and our own statute books. So you cannot actually make those direct comparisons with those much larger jurisdictions. And the second reason why those comparisons are not helpful to this debate, Deputy Reniff outlined many reasons which helped us to remember that we have a far greater need here in Jersey. I remember the care inquiry being published. I was sat in that seat over there on the day that it was published and we had to debate it in the States Assembly. I read that care inquiry. I can see Deputy Labby nodding as well. I know that she remembers as well. There are other members in this Assembly who were here at that time as well. And we took that very seriously at the time. And I feel that the level of seriousness that we are taking those issues is diminishing over time. And I would like us to use this debate as a stopping point to actually think about this seriously and take it more seriously. the work that the Office of the Children's Commissioner does is a direct result of that care inquiry and of the harms that were done to children in our island over generations. It is a righting of many, many historic wrongs. And as Deputy Renner said, clipping the wings of the people doing that work is putting children at risk of further harm being caused. I want to remind members that the Office of the Children's Commissioner is, I think, the only human rights institution that we have in Jersey. I think this was raised in the report. It certainly is a very well-respected human rights institution and represents Jersey at an international level. There is a reputational risk here of us cutting this budget. And one of the pieces of work which came out of the care inquiry, which we are gradually working towards, is incorporating the UNCRC into our legislation, which is not a small task. And the Office of the Children's Commissioner have been absolutely pivotal at every single step that we have made so far towards that goal. One of these was a legislative gap analysis. And to take one piece of legislation, which is very dear to me, which we recently approved, was the same-sex parents' rights. That was raised in a legislative gap analysis by the Office of the Children's Commissioner. And there are other areas that still need to be worked on in Jersey before we can actually have the UNCRC fully extended and ratified and incorporated into our legislation. We're not there yet. We're still actually, I feel, at the beginning of the culture change that was mandated by the care inquiry. We're only just starting that work. I do see a lot of progress, but we are not there yet. So I can understand that the figures quoted by the Assistant Minister, I can understand that senior officers looking at that figure might make a snap judgment of, okay, I think that's quite a lot, isn't it? But actually, that's where this assembly comes in. We are the ones who are supposed to have the social context behind those numbers and to make those judgments as to what is important and what is not. And, sir, sometimes I think it's hard for us to see the value of the Office of the Children's Commissioner because much of the work that is done is, by its very nature, it's hidden and unseen. And again, Deputy Renner articulated this so brilliantly. The work that they do is with the most vulnerable of our islanders. It's with children living in poverty, children with special educational needs, children who apparently are imprisoned, children with mental health problems, children who have been abused, children who have been coerced and exploited by criminals, children who do not have any parents. And we are, in fact, their parents. We are their corporate parents. And I cannot, in good conscience, cut resources to the office of the people who are defending the rights of those children and advocating for those children, who right now today in Jersey are experiencing severe harm. There are children on our island right now who are in danger and who are experiencing harm. And so Deputy Renner mentioned the unequal power relationships. Children under 16 have absolutely no political power. They have us to speak for them. And I try to be the voice of children whenever I can, sir. And I will not let the care inquiry be forgotten. I will not let children be forgotten. And I really hope that I have changed some minds today and that Deputy Renner and others who have spoken in favour of this tiny amount of money in the grand scheme of things, I hope that we have changed some minds because we are all corporate parents, as the chair of the scrutiny panel mentioned. And we must not do anything to silence the Commissioner or silence the voices of children. We must empower them as much as we can, and we must approve this amendment today.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. This was always going to potentially be an emotive and slightly difficult debate. And I recall a number of either days or weeks ago saying to the Chief Minister, could we not just take the money perhaps from Children's Services and top up the budget of the Children's Commissioner? And that could have been an easy solution. But in asking the question, of course, I had his response, but in asking the question, I was reminded that that is the wrong thing and would be the wrong thing to do. I'm not really sure that ideally I want to reference back too much to the care inquiry, but as other members have, I suspect it's important that I do. And in receiving that inquiry on behalf of the island in the first instance, and looking at the some of the recommendations, one of which was to create the Office of the Children's Commissioner, and I stand by that decision today as I did then. And of course, on opposite me was my coalition colleague, Minister Deputy Mezek, supporting. But I knew, and I subsequently said in a number of debates, that the irony of the place that we found ourselves in as an island was that it would be relatively easy to create the office of the Children's Commissioner, because it was a matter of finding a bit of budget and drafting legislation. It would be relatively easy to introduce other pieces of legislation which protected children. The most difficult piece of work was actually going to be transforming the service and actually providing, as corporate parents, loving homes for the most vulnerable children across our community. And it gives me no pleasure to say, and so it has proven. We have our second Children's Commissioner, and I have no reason to say anything other than other members have said that that Commissioner is doing a good job in fulfilling her functions. I would remind the Assembly that at the end of this financial year, the budget spend is forecast to be about £937,000. So just under what this budget for 2026 is suggesting. And I think that's important as well. The mover of the amendment used the term bare minimum, and I understand why, because we are a legislative debating chamber, and one person's bare minimum can be the fulfilling of the statutory function. And the mover also, and the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, are right to say it is a decision for this Assembly, ultimately, the budget that should be provided. But I'll revert back to our role as corporate parents. And I think we would be doing the children of this island a grave disservice if we simply thought that we were delivering well for children by increasing this budget when it's already proposed to be more than will be spent. And the reason I say that is because I have great admiration for the new head of children's services, the work that the minister, who sadly can't be with us today, but also we've heard from his assistant minister earlier, because in the budget before members is an additional £8 million to actually start the service redesign and delivery to really safeguard children and provide the service that they need and that we all want to see provided for. There is also £12 million for physical homes. And I know that scrutiny challenged them on that amount for children's homes. And for my part, if I were choosing where to put the money to really address the challenges of vulnerable children in our community, it would be into the transformation of the service, which has been slow, but it is now making steady progress, and into the provision of bricks and mortar where vulnerable children can feel safe. Because at the end of the day, and maybe this is just my political tradition, sir, human rights are important, but we each one know what is the most important thing to our security and to the protection of children, which is critical to being a corporate parent. It is the provision of a loving home. And that's difficult to think of in terms of human rights, but it can be done. The most important thing is a loving home. And that is why I've said to many individual islanders, when there's been campaigns for fostering parents or adoptive parents, if you've got love in your heart for the children of the future, if you've got a bit of money and a room, then you are absolutely someone who can do your bit by fostering or adopting. And I think that the Assembly can look at this budget and see that they are making their commitment to the office of the Children's Commissioner, as I've said, a greater budget than will have been spent, and I think this is really important, than will have been spent this year or the year before. Those statutory functions of a human rights institution can be delivered. But where we address the issues that Deputy Renouf rightly spoke about, the continuing serious case reviews, the continuing harm that some of the children in our community and because of our official elected positions within our care are experiencing, are addressed through the additional money that the Children's Minister and his Assistant Minister and the Council of Ministers have been convinced about. To really address those issues, that is where the money should be being placed. And that is why, in asking the Chief Minister that initial question, I knew that if we are to support vulnerable children in our community, the place we should be putting our money is in the service redesign and in the physical houses. And not as this amendment suggests. So I know it's a difficult decision for members, and we will all approach it perhaps from a slightly different perspective. But I do fundamentally think that each member of the Assembly really does want to do their best for vulnerable children and all young people across our community. And that is, for my part, how I come to the point of view that the amendment is not necessary. The Commissioner can continue to do her work, meeting the statutory requirements, and at the same time, because of where the budget has been given, the Minister for Children can transform the service, which will absolutely make real everyday difference to the lives of children in his care. And therefore, when they're in his care, they are in our care. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadia.
So that last speech was very compelling, and I think there's lots of good things that Deputy Gorst said, in particularly encouraging local families who have the availability and the heart. I think he used the word for a young person to make a real difference in their lives to do so, and he made a great pitch for the fostering and adoption services in Jersey. I do wonder, sir, whether he was getting quite far away from the amendment, though, because we're debating here whether or not to increase the expenditure, the budget for the Children's Commissioner's Office by £61,000. We're not debating Deputy Gorst's amendment to take that £61,000 and put it towards fostering and adoption services, or to give an extra £61,000 to the Minister for Children so that he can do all of that good work which he just spoke about. And that's because that amendment doesn't exist, sir. Deputy Gorst hasn't put that amendment in place. This is simply, there is no counterfactual here that is being offered, and there is instead a false dichotomy that has been presented, I think, by Deputy Gorst and others, saying, look at what we could do with this money. I could stand up and say, actually, I think that £61,000 could be put towards the establishment of an Equality and Human Rights Commission, sir. We don't have one in Jersey. And I could stand up and say that actually it's slightly out of context to have a Children's Rights Commission and a Children's Rights Commissioner when we forget about the multitude of other humans that exist in our society who have disability issues, who have gender incapacity issues because they're women, and they're still not being treated equally in our society, or because they're elderly, or whatever the ism is that you want to apply, and all of which can have an impact on children, of course, because if a child is living with a minority parent who's not being treated equally for whatever reason, that is a further complication potentially to the conditions in which they're growing up, which might simply be financial, sir. So I'm not going to make that speech because it's not a speech that I want to offer whataboutism in, although I do think that there is a future debate, of course, to be had on that very issue. The way I look at this is very much in the way I looked at the previous debate that we were having about stats, is where is the risk-benefit analysis in this? What is the risk if we don't give the £61,000 to the Children's Commissioner's Office, given that, as Deputy Dublé said, it is a very small amount of money, both in reality, actually, and in the grand scheme of things in terms of the budget we're talking about. The risk is that if this Assembly makes the wrong decision here, and actually the warnings that are being presented to us from an evidence-based point of view from the scrutiny panel are correct, then for the, what's the expression, sir, for the want of a bit of tar, a halfpenny of tar, the ship was spoiled, I think, is something to that effect. And I think this is actually what we're talking about here, except it's not a ship that's going to be spoiled. It's actually that very good work that is done by the Commission's office on behalf of all of the children of Jersey, sir, is what we're risking. And it's not a risk that I'm willing to take for the sake of £61,000 in a £1.3 billion budget, sir.
Thank you, Deputy.
Sorry, sir, can I have a point of clarification?
Are you prepared to do that, Deputy Doggett? Yes.
I was just wondering if you could just explain what gender incapacity, what you meant by gender incapacity as a woman.
I'm happy to have a conversation afterwards, sir.
Anyone else wishes to speak on this amendment? Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. It is an evocative debate to have over a seemingly, a very small amount of money in the context of the budget. But it's not just about that. It's about, I think, a principle. And the first principle we adhere to is our, I think, joint and unwavering commitment to children as an assembly. And I think that's been demonstrated in very many ways over the years, more so since the care inquiry in 2017, acceptance of that, and the thought, the effort, and the tens and tens of millions of pounds of additional investments been invested in children and young people since that time. And as a result of that investment, of the creation of the Children's Commission and other aspects, Jersey is a much safer place for children than it was. Now, we still have a way to go, and I think it's a journey that will keep going for some time, and as society evolves, the way we support and invest in children will have to evolve with that. And I'm sure every member of this assembly, as in past assemblies and future assemblies, will not deviate from that course. I do not accept that we are in breach of any statutory obligations to the Office of the Children's Commissioner. The Children's Commissioner has met with Council and Ministers. I last met with her in July. There are quarterly meetings with the Children's Commissioner chaired by the Chief Officer of the Cabinet Office, the Accountable Officer, where finance and governance is discussed in detail. When I last met with the Children's Officer, we talked about finance. And at that meeting, whilst the Children's Officer does her job well, I think we're very lucky to have her. And of course, she would always take more resource if it's available, as will the head of any organisation that comes before scrutiny or this government at times. And one thing that does happen for sure is that when we create an arm's length organisation or a body or a corporation soul, if we don't, this is why I get to principles about budgeting and the challenges we have about the financial challenges that we're facing now and in the years ahead. One thing happens every single time, 100% of examples I can think of, is that they grow and they grow and they keep growing. And if we allow them to grow unchecked, which we have in the past in many instances, it has a significant impact on our finances as an island. So I'm not giving way to Deputy Renner. And that's why it lights on. And of course, a lot of small amounts add up to a large amount. And that's one of the problems we have here. Right across the whole estate, there are hundreds of separate budgets, and 100,000 here and 60,000 there and 500,000 that add up, and that's why we are facing such a predicament. And when I met with the Children's Commission, I want to reiterate the good relationship we've had and the good work that she's doing. While she said she would always want more money to do more, I was not made aware of any dire straits, only a commitment of her to continue to work in the best interests of the children with the resources she has. Of course, she said she would like more. And I apologise if I misled scrutiny when I said I wasn't aware of any cuts. We were talking in the context of, I believe, last year's budgets when we looked at the £130,000 of reductions that were agreed. And there's not an additional 61,000 on top of that. That was reductions for 24, 25 and 26, £130,000. I think it might have been suggested by Deputy Reniff that 61,000 was on top of that. So in relation to those figures, there were no further cuts planned, so I apologise if I wasn't clear on that. Just briefly, I want to sort of align myself completely with the comments of Deputy Gorst. I won't repeat them, but I think he made some very good and clear points, and I hope he spoke for all of us when he talked about the additional love and care that children need. And if we look to this budget, where we are proposing to increase support for children's services by £7.6 million and further investment of £12 million in loving homes. And all of this investment, so all of it, most of it, and most of the additional investment, most of the policy decisions we make are based upon advice of our children's services. I'm sorry, sir, I didn't. I will give way to.
Is that a £10 fine for you? Yes. All right.
What was the phone?
What was it?
It was the phone, was it?
Well, it was something electronic, wasn't it? Yes.
All of a lot of those investments, the direction we're moving in, the significant investment. If you look at the overall state's budget over the last 10 years or 8 years since the Care Commission, and you look at the financial lines of investing in children, they have increased by tens of millions of pounds. And a lot of those increases has come on the recommendations of our advisors, our officials, and the Children's Commissioner. They do extremely good work, and the budget proposals we have for them, which leaves them with a budget of 954,000 for 2026, against a spend of this year of about 930,000, should be sufficient. I think Deputy Reniff, I forget the phrases he used, but I didn't agree with them. And when we say they should be sufficient, and I think, what I mean is I'm not dismissing this lightly and saying, oh, they should be. A lot of work goes into this. There are regular meetings with the Commissioner and the Accountable Officer, and we recognise that. And just to provide a bit more context around that, I understand there are no reductions in staffing planned. Most likely that the saving will come from non-staff budget lines, such as the amount the Commission spends on legal advice, sir. If the Commissioner finds that the legal advice budget line becomes insufficient during the year, or there are any other administrative pressures, as in every year, the Accountable Officer will always work closely with the Commissioner and to agree that any overspends of budget they have will be managed and supported through any financial support additional financial support we can give them from the Cabinet Officer. As I understand, there was support provided with the Commissioner's move to new premises. We will not let them down. We will not allow ourselves not to meet our statutory obligations. That's been those allegations have been thrown around a lot in this debate. Of course, we are not usurping or avoiding those in any way, shape or form. What we are trying to do is tighten up spending across the whole estate of the public sector. And as I've said before, it is evocative and challenging when we look at things like the Children's Commissioner, as we looked at other aspects in the budget, sir. But it is necessary. It does not undermine our support for children, support for the Commissioner, And I draw members' attention again to the significant uplift, the £7.6 million uplift in this budget to support children's services, sir, on the advice of our experts, sir. And I commend the work of the Children's Commission, and I provide members with reassurance that she will continue to get that support from government, as she will from this Assembly, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon Deputy Miles to reply. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir, and I'd like to thank all members who spoke in this debate. It has gone on a long time and it's been very wide-ranging, so I will attempt to sum up as best I can. First of all, to Deputy Ferry, speaking as the Assistant Minister for Children and Families, in the absence of the Children's Minister. I think every word of his speech, for me, acknowledged exactly why we should be funding the Children's Commissioner to the full amount. He says that if she needs the money, she could ask for it, and if it's considered essential, then, you know, the money will be found. I think that compromises the concept of independence. She should not have to go cap in hand to a government department to do what she wants. That's not independence. At this rate, you know, COM is deciding where it should be spent. I was going to comment on the website, but I think Deputy Renouf has covered that. I'd like to thank Deputy Renouf for passionate speech explaining the history of the role and the gravity. Again, I'd say to Deputy Scott, I'd echo Deputy Doublet's comments. I don't think anybody is virtue signalling in this debate. Certainly nobody in my panel is virtue signalling. We have all taken this very seriously. We've spoken to the Children's Commissioner and we've heard what everybody has to say. I am quite interested in the comparisons that she makes. And yes, there is no doubt that other areas are funded and they have bigger offices of Children's Commissioner. And she talks about one of the organisations being Wales. Actually, in Wales, they do have a Children's Commissioner and she has a budget of about £1.8 million. She has 26 staff. But actually in Wales, she is not the only watchdog for children's rights and welfare. There is NYAS Cymru, which offers independent advocacy. There's Children in Wales, there's a UNCRC monitoring group, there's a Children's Legal Centre. And most importantly, sir, Wales, another jurisdiction, have a public ombudsman, a public ombudsperson. All of those things that we don't have. So when we look at a budget of 954,000, it's important to realise actually just what that budget is achieving. She is the only children's rights organisation in Jersey. I was very interested to hear Deputy Gorse. I think he does... I certainly don't agree with him when he says that we're doing children a grave disservice by increasing this budget. I think he has pitted looked after children against all other vulnerable children in this island. What about children who are neurodiverse? What about children who have special educational needs? This is not just about looked after children. He didn't provide any evidence from the government as to why this cut is being imposed. Deputy Renouf asked for evidence. What is it? Where is the risk assessment asked for by Deputy Tadier? The principle is the same. Where is the evidence that the Children's Commissioner can take this cut in service? Of course, I hear about the investment that's going into children's services, the 8 million for loving homes and secure homes. But just because we're funding children's services doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be funding the Office of the Children's Commissioner. In fact, it's a reason that we should fund it. If we learn anything at all from the Independent Jersey Care Inquiry, it is that institutions can cause these issues and they need careful oversight. And that oversight will be provided by the Office of the Children's Commissioner. The Chief Minister, sir, admitted we still have a way to go, but he still reduces the budget, despite the statutory requirements. I heard that he was going to put budgetary principles before children. The Office of the Children's Commissioner in Jersey hasn't grown, it has shrunk. No other regulator told Scrutiny that they needed funds, and we asked them all. We went out to the Care Commissioner, we went out to Jax, but the Office of the Children's Commissioner did, and she articulated quite clearly why she needed that 61,000 in her budget, and that is why this panel have lodged the amendment. The Chief Minister said it should be sufficient. Government have not provided any evidence to the panel to show why it is sufficient. The evidence we have is a commissioner who tells us it is not. And he also said that the Office of the Children's Commissioner, I feel that the Office of the Children's Commissioner shouldn't be a casualty of tightening spend across the public sector, because that is what I heard the Chief Minister say. So, sir, laws are only as strong as the will to uphold them. Yes, the government have committed £8 million to the children's social care in this budget, but the decision to reduce the Commissioner's funding by only 61,000 undermines the very oversight to safeguard those investments. And we can all affirm children's rights in speeches and policies and strategies. But if we will not fund the institution that was created to guarantee those rights, then our commitment remains rhetorical, not real. I was around for the care inquiry, not in this assembly, but I was a public servant. And the care inquiry showed us in great detail what happens when oversight fails. This amendment ensures that it doesn't fail again. I've heard nothing to suggest why COM think the budget should be reduced. And in this case, the Chief Minister has firmly delegated the choice to the Assembly, and that's actually where the choice should sit. A short-term saving weakens long-term protection, or a reaffirmation that Jersey means what it says when it commits to children's rights. So the panel urges you to reflect upon your role as not only corporate parents, but actually guardians of the rights of every child on this island, and that you support the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the appel called for? The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members go to of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been rejected. 14 votes pour, 26 votes contra, and 4 abstentions. Yes.
Those members voting for the Conotab of St Clement and St Mary and Deputies Southern, Tadier, Doublé, Coles, Porre, Miles, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Jearn, Stevenson, Kovac and Wilson, and those members abstaining, Deputies Gardner, Moore, War and Alex Curtis.
The next amendment, the 35th amendment, has been withdrawn. The 33rd amendment lodged by Deputy Tadier. Deputy, in relation to this amendment, there was an amendment lodged by you and then an amendment lodged by the Minister, the second amendment. As I understand it, you wish to, in effect, withdraw your amendment and have the amendment read as amended by the Minister's amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I don't think it's technically correct, so I'm withdrawing the amendment, but I'm having it read as amended by the Minister's amendment.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It comes the same thing, yes.
Yeah.
So the amendment will be read as amended by the Minister's second amendment, if members are content for that to occur. Yes. Thank you, Graffier.
Page 3, paragraph B12. After the words are set out in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 47, after the words included in the annex, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. In order to ensure that budget allocations for arts, culture and heritage are managed in a simple and transparent manner, the Minister for Treasury and Resources shall work with the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development during 2026 to consolidate all relevant government spend under the head of Expenditure for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture within the Budget Government Plan 2027 to 2030. This consolidation would not impact or include the funding provided to the bailiffs' chambers as part of arts, culture and heritage funding, and would exclude funding for entities such as Jersey Library and Community Compass, which are considered to fall outside of the scope of the arts, culture and heritage funding line.
Deputy Tadia.
Thank you, sir. This has come round slightly quicker than I expected, but luckily I've got at least some of the figures to hand, sir, to make sense of this. First of all, can I thank the Minister and his team and maybe the wider ministerial team for meeting me halfway, I think is fair to say, on this proposition. I won't speak for excessively long because that agreement, I think, has perhaps curtailed some of what might need to be said, but there is at least a minimum that I do need to explain about what to make sense of this for members who I wouldn't have expected necessarily to have followed this quite as closely, given the fact that we've had a long and complicated budget debate already, sir. Essentially, this does boil down to the 1% for arts, heritage and culture. The principle is simple enough, and I may use the short form of just calling it arts funding, but by that, of course, I'm not negating the importance of culture and heritage more generally. The idea is simple, is that 1% of overall government expenditure should be spent on arts. And at the moment, that should mean that roughly, if the budget is almost 1.3 billion, that means that there should be £13 million in the pot for that sector. And as we know, I don't want to reopen old debates, sir, that principle has not had universal support from assemblies in the past, but it has had majoritarian support, and it was reaffirmed just before the last budget debate in a standalone proposition, which I deliberately brought because I wanted to establish that as a separate principle, sir. So the 1% does stand as a principle until such a time as a future government gets rid of it. What I didn't appreciate, and I'm still critical of, is that this government hasn't supported the spirit of the 1%, and what they've tried to do, therefore, because they couldn't get rid of the formula, they decided, I think, initially, to lump more and more into the 1%. And this is where the rub is, because it was pre-existing expenditure. So if we think about what was originally in the scope of the 1%, it was really always intended to be the 4 arm's-length organisations. They don't always like to be called that, by the way. I was slightly pulled up, I don't think it was for me, but one of the heads of the organisation, who will remain nameless for the moment, said, look, we're not an arm's-length organisation, we're independent, we just happen to receive a grant, not an insubstantial grant from government, but otherwise we're not arm's-length, we're not doing work on behalf of the government. But there is this sense, of course, in which arts has to be independent. You know, it's not for government to try and censor or dictate what the arts sector does. But nonetheless, there is a sense, of course, in which they are delivering for the wider community on behalf of government. So I'm happy to accept that, you know, there is an argument that these are ALOs all the same. What was also included there from the beginning, sir, which is why I amended my own amendment, sir, is Gérier, because when there was a report done to try and do the original benchmarking back in 2018 from the then Economy Department, it basically used as the starting point those ALOs plus Gérier, which back in those days was called Le Don Baleine. Le Don Baleine still exists, but and the amount of funding that Don Belen was receiving from government back then was around about the £150,000 a year mark, which is not a lot, but they were also operating, I suppose, slightly as a trust in a sense. So they did have teachers, and there was a recognition certainly that when it came to Gerrier, there was an urgent need for something to be done. And of course, what we've seen nowadays is that the Gerrier budget has increased quite a lot, and I think we're not going to have the debate today, or indeed in this budget, about Gerrier. I think there's lots of good work going on at Gerrier at the moment, both within SIPES, and there's lots of good work going on at Heritage, which is why I asked my question earlier in the week of the Minister for Economic Development to show that there is actually Gerrier both as a language which is being taught, so it's a legitimate subject in its own right at school. That's not immediately comparable to other subjects, but it is also of significant cultural importance, and there is that outreach element that both, in fact, SIPES and Heritage do together. So that sum has increased quite significantly, and I think it recognises the increased importance that we all put on our native and ancient language, our Norman language of Gerrier. But then what government decided to do is say, okay, look, we've not won the argument on the 1%, but we can get Tadier a different way, sir. And it's probably it's not probably parliamentary to say that, sir, but that might have been some of the thought processes. So remember, hold in our mind that the total amount that should be spent on arts in the coming year should be about 13 million. But of course, all of that didn't add up to 13 million. It added up to about 10.8. But there was Gerrier Liberation Day, and then, of course, what else can we put in there to to plug the gap, £1 million or £2 million gap? They said, why not put the Jersey Music Service in there? Because the Jersey Music Service is 1.2 million. That's already paid for. It's not new spending. But let's, on top of that, put libraries and the community compass. So the reason I objected in particular to Jersey Library Services being included in that is because it's the Minister for Education, Lifelong Learning, or SIPES, whatever he wants to call it, has a responsibility to fund libraries. It's a statutory obligation that he has to fund it adequately for it to provide its services. And the community compass, again, this is a relatively new thing that I wasn't immediately familiar with, which costs about £391,000. I think it's important to put these things on record, because this isn't about saying that libraries, music service, community compass, Gerrier, all of this stuff isn't valid. These are all cultural in the wider scheme of things. It's just that they're already paid for. We don't need to start lumping new things into the 1% in a bid from Treasury to try and get that figure down. So what does this mean in reality? It means that from now on, it means that those ALOs will be funded. They will take up the majority of the arts funding, which will include Gerrier, but it also includes, let's list them, the Arts Centre, Jersey, Art House Jersey, the Opera House, and Jersey Heritage, but it also includes the Ballet de Gerry, which is operating closely with the Jersey Opera House. It will also include the pre-existing spends that the bailiffs department, sir, that your department has for Liberation Day, etc., for those type of events. What it does take out of the 1% calculation will be libraries and community compass. So effectively, the compromise which the Minister and I have come to is that the Jersey Music Service should be included. I think there is a rationale here, because I think Jersey Music Service, like Gerrier, is a supplementary service. Music gets taught in schools already as a subject, so if you want to do a GCSE or a pre-GCSE, if you're in year 7, 8 and 9, you'll probably do music as part of your core curriculum. You don't have to do a GCSE in it, but then on top of that, there's the Jersey Music Service, which is peripatetic, goes round teaching students who want to learn a specific instrument. So if you're doing music GCSE, you may also be getting supplementary lessons to play, let's say, the tuba or the drums or the piano, whatever. There are lots of instruments. We're not going to list them all now. So I think there is at least an intellectual consistency alongside Gerrier, which of course mirrors the fact that we have lots of teachers in schools already teaching all sorts of subjects, language subjects, but Gerrier have a slightly different remit in the sense that they provide other services, often in the community, not limited just to schools. So I'm happy to accept that. What it means for the government is that it doesn't have any additional pressure, because actually the 1.2% that was going to be the case to be spent on arts is going to be reduced, and government is already spending 1% for the next 3 or 4 years. And really where this becomes important is in as I do the calculation, in 2028, this is probably 29, this is probably when it starts to become more material. Actually, it's quite likely, I would suggest, that if I was a betting man, sir, that government is going to overspend. They're probably going to overspend next year. And if budgets do increase, that means that, of course, the 1% for arts will increase in real terms, but not necessarily in percentage terms. I don't actually have a problem with that. I think the simplicity of the 1% has stood the test of time since it's come in. It provides a very simple formula, and it does say, look, if government's going to spend millions and hundreds of millions of pounds, then for every £100 you spend in public spending, one of those pounds has to be on arts, culture and heritage. And it means that you're doing it within that. So, of course, if the health budget is increasing more and more, why should arts get less than the 1% just because there's more need in health? That's the way I look at it. And I know often the counter-argument is put there. But actually, arts, culture and heritage contribute to every part of that aspect. So when the health department has more need, it's also absolutely necessary, I think, that the wider community also has a commensurate availability for that arts sector, because, of course, there is a preemptive health benefit to much of culture, and there is also, of course, a synergy between culture and sports, sir. I'm going to leave the comments there, sir. I'm not going to go into the fact that there will be some work in the future that needs to be done on this, sir. I'm not going to go into that in depth, apart from to say the fact that there are still signs up, if you drive up to Highlands College, which talk about the education, sport and culture department. Those signs haven't been changed yet. I do wonder sometimes whether we should change those signs or whether we should just change the ministerial portfolios to give culture back to education. That's something I'd certainly be interested in, but I know that there are equally some counter-arguments which says that culture should remain at economic development. In fact, that more and more of what's being done at culture should go to economic development. So I'll leave those comments there, sir. Certainly for my part, in whatever capacity in the future, I'd love to have more input, because I think this is an area which needs to be developed in the future. I don't think we've got it completely right yet, but I think that the momentum that we've gathered over the last 6 years in the cultural sector in Jersey, and indeed in the creative industries, has been important. We're going in the right direction, and certainly I wouldn't want to see this stop for a lack of adequate government support that can supplement the private investment, both in terms of money and energy that's given to those valuable sectors, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak? Minister?
Thank you, sir. I was hesitating to speak just because I don't want to lengthen a debate that really doesn't need to happen. We're only in debate because of the lateness of the amendments. But it's just to thank Deputy Tadier for working with us to find a form of the amendments which works for both sides. And I agree, Deputy Tadier, I think, knows as much as I know. He is incredibly passionate about Jersey's arts, culture and heritage. I am as well. And so between the two of us, I know we both want to see the whole culture sector flourish in Jersey and continue to for many years. So with that, I hope that there'll be very little response from Deputy Tadier, just for the sake of time, and that I also hope that no other members really wish to speak about this, so we can vote and hopefully move on. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Moore.
Sir, you'll be pleased, and so will the Minister, to know that I do not wish to speak, but simply to record an interest, although a non-remunerated interest, but I am a non-executive director of the Jersey Opera House.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon Deputy Tadier to reply. Deputy.
Sir, thank you. I'll reply simply to thank the Minister for his comments, and to just actually acknowledge Deputy Moore's comments about the Opera House. We've seen the reopening of the Opera House this year. It's something which we need to be proud of. The new Opera House is a beautiful building, both inside and out, especially inside. It's something which the Minister, I think, rightly has received questioning from in this Assembly about certain aspects of that. But the important thing, whether it's the Opera House or the Arts Centre or any other future theatres or galleries in Jersey, is not the fabric of the building so much. It's important that those buildings are, of course, maintained. It's what goes on within those buildings that's important, sir. And I hope that the Deputy Moore would take my gratitude back to the performances and the work that's already been going on at the Opera House. I've been to see 2 performances recently, just in a private capacity, and they were both excellent, and including one musical performance, which was really a virtuoso performance. And I do encourage as many members of the public to take advantage of our arts sector in Jersey as possible. And the last thing to point out is that the value in the arts is not just limited to these buildings, but actually all of the arts organisations over here have been making great strides to make sure that groups in Jersey that have previously not engaged with arts traditionally have had the opportunity to do so. So one last example I'll give before sitting down, sir, is that the two examples are like the trees that appeared in Howard Davis Park at Christmas a couple of years ago, the musical trees or whatever they were called, something to that effect. Dreaming trees, that's right, dreaming trees. It attracted so many people who wouldn't have ordinarily gone to a museum, a theatre or a concert, and the same happened to be the case for the beautiful globe that appeared out of nowhere, it seems, in the vicinity of St Saviour's Hospital in the water there. So that again attracted people from all over the island, and that is art and culture in progress, sir. So I do commend this amendment to members.
Thank you. Is the appel called for? No. That has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Once the amendment has been adopted unanimously, 44 votes in favour. We now move on to the second amendment lodged by Deputy Balash. I'll ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B12, after the words appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that, 1, on page 87, table 41, health insurance fund should be replaced with the following table. 2, on page 88, after the words skills of primary care staff, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. From 2026, the proportion of Class 1 and Class 2 social security contributions on earnings below the standard earnings limit paid into the health insurance fund will increase from 2% to 2.5%. This is estimated to increase contributions paid into the fund by £14 million in 2026, increasing to £15 million by 2029. This does not change the overall contribution rates paid by employers or employees. 3. On page 88, before the words, the value of the fund is expected to fall to around £61 million by 2029, there should be inserted the words, without the increase in contributions. 4. On page 90, after the words, range of working age benefits, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. From 2026, the proportion of Class 1 and Class 2 social security contributions on earnings below the standard earnings limit paid into the Social Security Fund will decrease from 10.5% to 10%. This is estimated to decrease contributions paid into the fund by £14 million in 2026, increasing to £15 million by 2029. This does not change the overall contributions rates paid by employers or employees. And 5, on page 91, table 43, Social Security Fund, should be replaced with the following table.
Deputy Balash.
So I should like to open by expressing my thanks to the Minister and to officials in the Social Security Department for their assistance in the drafting of this amendment. They have been extremely helpful in giving me details of the changes that have taken place in the last few years, details which now appear in my report. As members will know, the Health Insurance Fund, the HIF, was established in 1967 to subsidise primary care, visits to GPs, and to pay for pharmaceutical benefits. For the past 10 years or so, we have in fact enjoyed free prescriptions at the cost of the HIF. It gets money from the contributions paid by employers and employees. 12.5% is deducted from those earnings, and of that 12.5%, 2% goes into the HIF and 10.5% goes into the Social Security Fund. The HIF has been built up over the years and contains, at the end of 2025, just over £101 million. As members will have seen from my report, considerable extra burdens have been placed on the HIF in recent years. In 2023, free access to surgery consultations was given to children under 18. In June 2023, after many years of no change, the subsidy for GPs' fees was increased by £20. In 2024, free access to surgery consultations was extended to all full-time students, and an extra £10 was added to the subsidy for GPs' fees. Also in 2024, as a result of a budget amendment from Deputy Kovacs, I think, free medical dressings were provided to those with a clinical need. In addition, in the last couple of years, the Medicines Adherence Service to help vulnerable people take their medicine, a diabetic service, and the Health Access Scheme to reduce the cost of GPs for people on low income have all been introduced. Contractual arrangements have also been made with GPs to provide cervical screening, to provide a subsidy for primary care nurses and other healthcare professionals, and to provide vaccinations for flu and COVID. All these changes have been funded by the HIF. Yet nothing extra has been put into the fund. It still only gets 2% from the contributions by employers and employees. Unsurprisingly, the value of the HIF is shrinking from £101 million at the end of 2025. It goes down to 61 million at the end of 2029. The HIF will reach zero in about 2034, 8 years away after one more budget. The Minister of Social Security, surprisingly, appears untroubled at the prospect. She was asked several times at the scrutiny panel whether she was concerned about the falling in value of the HIF, and her eventual reply was, "The Minister for Health and Social Services is undertaking a piece of work to look at health funding as a whole. I think the Health Insurance Fund is an important part of the jigsaw. I would be more concerned if we were not spending money in the Health Insurance Fund and that people could not afford to go to the GP." But that seems to miss the point. People will not be able to afford to go to the GP if there is insufficient money to pay the subsidy to GPs and the other benefits paid by the HIF. The table on page 87 of the budget makes that clear. Payments out of the HIF in 2026 are estimated to be 66 million, but the income from contributions is only 54 million. There will, at the end of the next budget period, not be enough money to pay for the benefits currently paid. Where is the money going to come from? I don't think that the Health Minister has spare funds floating around. The HIF must, it seems to me, be put on a sound financial footing. It is not getting enough of the contributions being paid by employers and employees. My amendment would change the percentage from 2% to 2.5%. That would affect the percentage going into the Social Security Fund, obviously, but we are told that it is in good financial shape. Since the Social Security Fund was established, the contributions of employers and employees have always been shared between the two funds. I can't remember exactly when, but many years ago, when the contributions were increased, the proportion paid into the HIF was set at 2%, and to the Social Security Fund 10.5%. The two funds have always shared the contributions. The amendment can alter the sharing arrangements because the Social Security Fund is in good shape, but the HIF is not. Money is not being taken from the Social Security Fund for some unconnected purpose. Paying an appropriate level of contributions into the HIF is one of the purposes of taking contributions from employers and employees. So I don't understand the comments of the Council of Ministers. They say the amendment is unnecessary, but that's plainly wrong. It is necessary, or the HIF will run out. They say it could lead to additional complexity in identifying actions over the next few years to provide a sustainable funding mechanism. But how will putting the HIF on a sound financial footing get in the way of anything? It makes no sense. I understand that the Health Minister has a plan to take over control of the HIF, something which, in fact, I would strongly oppose. The existence of an independently controlled health insurance fund is a guarantee that the subsidies for primary care, which are currently paid out, can continue to be paid. And it is also a guarantee of the continuing status of the GPs as independent contractors. Changing that would be a fundamental and very controversial matter. Swallowing up the HIF in the gargantuan finances of the Health Department so that the funds can be used for other purposes would remove those guarantees. But even if my reservations are ignored and the decisions to give all the money to the Health Minister eventually come to pass, why not pass over a health insurance fund which has some money in it? What's the point of risking passing over an exhausted fund? And if the plan is not to exhaust the fund, as the Social Security Minister asserts, why not do something about it now? I'm afraid that I find absolutely no logic in the government's position. The Treasury Minister protests or has protested that members of this Assembly don't provide solutions for her. Well, this is a solution, but it seems not to be accepted by the government. The existing arrangements with the Health Insurance Fund have worked tolerably well for the last 60 years until now. It is only not working well now because the Assembly has placed financial burdens on the HIF without any regard as to whether they were affordable. There is no evidence that the change in proportions of contributions would adversely affect the Social Security Fund. Indeed, it would be very useful for the government actuary to be able to opine on the health of the fund on the basis of a firm decision to put the HIF on a sound footing. I move the amendment, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded? Yes, sir. Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Minister for Social Security.
Thank you, sir. I thank Deputy Balash for speaking about all of the good things that we're currently funding out of the Health Insurance Fund. And as I did say in scrutiny, I do think that ensuring that we have sufficient funding in place for primary care into the future is of extreme importance. And I really do support the work done across the primary care sector. However, I also support the work that is currently being done by the Health Minister and his team to understand the health costs across Jersey as a whole. And this is where I must part company with Deputy Balash and his amendment. What I've said in scrutiny, and I will repeat again today, is that Jersey needs a modern and holistic health system that supports patients and provides good value for money across the board. And that means that looking at healthcare as a whole and not making arbitrary distinctions between services provided under the health insurance law and services provided by the health department. This work is already underway. The Health Minister is setting up the Health and Care Partnership Board, and his officers are making significant progress in creating the structures that Jersey needs to support that much needed modern health system. And a key part of that work is a sustainable funding model and collaborative working across ministerial portfolios. And I am dedicated to that piece of work and working with the Minister as we move forward. Ministers have already committed to do this work, and that work is already underway. A comprehensive report will be prepared for the incoming Council of Ministers to review and agree their preferred approach forwards. Making such a permanent change as the Deputy suggests now in the allocation of social security income a matter of months before that report is available makes absolutely no sense at all. If incoming ministers consider that this specific proposal should form part of an overall health funding system, then those changes can be made in a year's time. There is absolutely no need to make that change today. It's important to note that this amendment does not raise any extra income. It seeks to reduce the income into the Social Security Fund and increase the income into the Health Insurance Fund. Members will make their own judgment as to the position of the Deputy in bringing forward this amendment, while also expressing his strong support for the Social Security Fund and seeking to increase the value of the state's grant being paid into the fund. If passed, this amendment reduces the income into the Social Security Fund by around £15 million a year on a permanent basis. This week, sir, I've been subject to significant and aggressive criticism for the budget proposal to make a short-term temporary cut to the state's grant that provides some of the income into the Social Security Fund. But what is being proposed in this amendment is a permanent cut to the Social Security Fund income for every year going forward. Is this affordable? And what analysis has been undertaken to justify this permanent reduction in income? Has it been assessed by actuaries? The Health Minister is currently undertaking a review of health funding. I can hear the laughs there, but of course I have requested actuarial advice on the changes that we are making, and I have published that advice. You can choose to read it if you haven't already. It's on the government website. The Health Minister is undertaking a review of health funding. I am undertaking a review of the social security system. Both reviews will be completed in time for the incoming Council of Ministers to consider the overall approach to these very important funding decisions. Both reviews will include information, statistics, analysis, and options for action. It would be irresponsible and unnecessary to take any decision today to change the income into these two funds on a permanent basis. And so, sir, I urge members to reject this amendment and allow ministers to complete the ongoing major reviews of both health funding and social security system.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. And we on the back row here couldn't help but contain ourselves slightly during the Minister's speech there, so apologies. But there was a distinct feeling of some irony, particularly to hear the Minister call some of Deputy Balash's proposals arbitrary. I think we should commend Deputy Balash for coming forward with some direction, some clarity, some action even, because I do believe 22 months ago we were promised direction, delivery and action, and what have we got? Review and review and review, and something being left over for the next government. Well, I look forward to hearing what the public think about this shambles at the election. I really do, because it is, I'm afraid, a shambles. 22 months to pick up a review that was already in place. In fact, health spending has been under review since 2012. I do recall that primary care, the sustainable model for primary care funding, was due to be delivered in September 2014. 2014. And it is still not here. So I'm sorry, but Deputy Balash has my vote. He has action, clarity, and something to deliver that is focused on restoring some fiscal responsibility for the island and thinking about the protection of future generations.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister of Health and Social Services.
I'll be relatively brief, sir. I'd just like to thank the Minister for Social Security for a very responsible approach to this. It's not often that I disagree with Deputy Balash, but I think in this instance, given that he knows full well that we're working on this and that it's got to be part of a joined-up piece of work, I've been very happy to talk to, and would have been happy to talk to Deputy Balash throughout the summer and autumn on his ideas. I don't think it's the best way to go about resolving the problem. I think we're both agreed that the health insurance fund could do with more money, and we also need to sort out long-term care funding. These things have been made very, very clear over the course of time. That work is underway. It's got to be done properly. I think we're at sort of, despite what Deputy Moore says, there's an awful lot of work going on in health. If more work had been done previously, the job might be easier. And I've made it plain that we've got, I think, another 4 years before the job can be put straight. We can only do things as time allows, and the work is ongoing. So whilst I expect all members to support the principle of addressing the problems with the health insurance fund, I would hope they'll have the good sense to realise that these decisions, it's difficult for these decisions to be made properly from the backbenchers, sir. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Barbara Ward.
Thank you, sir. I apologise to my Minister for Health because I have to support the Deputy's proposition, as I've been very, very protective about the HIV fund over the years, and I'm very concerned that it isn't being fully utilised as it was set up. Yes, we've had reduction in fees going to GPs, and that is absolutely applauded. Yes, we've got free dressings, and I could go on. But there are items, sir, that are on that list and should be addressed, and that is, I'll give an example of community out-of-hours services that we should be having here in Jersey. If we want to reduce people coming into an A&E department, they've got to go somewhere to go and get their prescriptions after hours. So that needs further investment. The ever-increasing cost of prescriptions, whether we like it or not, they're going up, and we want to keep those prescriptions free for patients. We don't want to see prescription charges being brought in. So you need that investment in the HIV fund to be able to provide that. Dentistry, yes, we have introduced free for children, but you know that there is a large population out there that do go to their dentist on a regular basis, and some of them do need support. This is where the HIF fund comes in. We've been reliably informed, and it's been written down, that after this money has been withheld from the state's grant, that the grant will resume in 2030. So the HIF fund, even if we put it up by 0.5%, it will not diminish the actual state's grant, because it's going back to its normal formula, which is welcome. The HIF fund is a primary healthcare function, and it's there to actually put that money back to islanders. It's part of an insurance policy, and we are going to get that back. And it has to be invested in. It's not, 3034 is not that far off. We have to put that money in. Sorry, 2034. Thank you, Connie Sharp. Sorry, yes. Thank you, Connie Sharp, for that correction. It's getting a bit late. So, sir, yes, I do support the Deputy's proposition, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I was minded to put my light on to speak, listening to the speech from Deputy Moore, who, as she's done on several occasions throughout this budget debate, made comparisons between the current government and what it is and isn't delivering versus the previous government which she led, and what it did or didn't deliver. And I actually came to the view, whilst listening to her, that there is definitely one sense in which her government was placed in an infinitely superior position to this one, and one for which this government sorely lacks. And I think it's important for us to hold our hands up and admit it. And that is that the government led by then Chief Minister Deputy Moore had a much better parliamentary opposition than this government has. So at least in those days, when opposition was put forward in this assembly to that government, it was consistent, it was well researched and based on values, whereas what we hear from the ramshackle opposition against the current government is extremely inconsistent, and I would say often opportunistic, because of the constantly fluctuating positions they seem to be able to take on amendments from time to time. And this must, of course, be a good example of that, because what is proposed by Deputy Balash, which he's obviously entirely within his rights to make a case for and say as a funding formula, I believe what I'm proposing is better than what there currently is. But you cannot maintain two positions, sir, that this government is plundering the Social Security Fund, as has been the headline on multiple occasions, and then come to this assembly and propose an amendment that would permanently reduce the amount of money that goes into the Social Security Fund. And members' laughter beforehand was cheap, and it was cheap for this very simple reason, sir, which is that the proposals from this government for the reduction in the state's grants and the actuarial review which has been commissioned by the Minister, is that reduction is set to be temporary, and what is proposed in this amendment is set to be permanent. They are therefore completely different and have completely different long-term financial forecasts as a result of it, and it is simply a mathematical fact that while what Deputy Balash proposes will theoretically be healthy for the health insurance fund, if you excuse the phrase, it will of course not be that for the Social Security Fund, as it will see less money on a permanent basis going into it. That's the basic maths of that. And so it is well known among us all, and I don't know who in this room thinks they have the perfect solution to it, but I think many of us think that the exact formation and use of the health insurance fund system right now is suboptimal, which is why it's being looked at to see if there are other models that could be more appropriate for Jersey. That preempting that in the way that he proposes doing, in such a way that we know will also permanently affect the long-term sustainability of the Social Security Fund, is clearly a bad thing to be proposing. And I find it greatly amusing that with all of the contributions that there have been in previous debates about the use of the state's grant, about strategic reserve and all the rest of things, that we find ourselves in this assembly having to listen to arguments that seem to totally change within a few days of one another. So I hope that, and I'm confident that the Assembly will reject this amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. I very much think the HIF fund should be ring-fenced for primary care. And I agree with Deputy Balash that it is going down. And I think it is something that needs to be addressed. But I just ask you not to do it off on the hoof now, but let us work so that we make sure that we're doing all the right things. I really respect Deputy Balash for bringing this. It's something that I have discussed with GP colleagues before I came into the States, and I really do think that the fund needs to be enhanced. But the Social Security Minister and the Health Minister and us, we are working together to try to get it to work. I will be defending the HIF with my life, but I just ask you not to vote for this proposition now because it's part of a larger piece of work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable St John.
Thank you, sir. So I'd just like to disassociate myself from the comments of Deputy Mezek, sir. So I think in footballing terms, it's time to put our foot on the ball, lift our heads, and then start playing the ball again. Sir, it's been a long week, sir. This chamber is designed to try and encourage collaboration, sir. I'm well aware of members from all sides of the House who've worked incredibly hard to prepare for this budget, and I do think that it is rather disappointing that my colleague chose to use those words, and I'm just discouraged by other comments that have been made in the chamber, sir. I will be supporting the Social Securities Minister's position on this, absolutely 100%, sir, but I would ask us to get back to playing the ball. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Constable. Deputy Renouf.
So I'm exceptionally grateful to the Constable for that speech. It has caused me to decide not to speak in this debate.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? If no one else wishes to speak, I call upon Deputy Balash to reply. Deputy Balash.
So I thank members for having spoken, and obviously particularly thank those who have spoken in support of the amendment. I appreciate that when the government links up with the Reform Party, it's almost impossible for a backbencher to succeed, so I shall be short. I will say, however, that I think Deputy Mezek is completely wrong and does not seem to understand that plundering a fund, the Social Security Fund, for purposes which are extraneous, irrelevant to, have nothing to do with the purpose for which that fund was established, is entirely different from using money for the very purpose for which it was established. And the contributions from employers and employees go into both these funds. And all that I am drawing attention to at the moment is that the amount of money going into the health insurance fund is insufficient to support it even in the middle term, let alone the long term. I don't really understand the government's position. As Deputy Moore said, we've heard about financial reviews for the health department for a very long time, and I should be extremely surprised if either this health minister or indeed the next one were able to produce a review recommending any particular changes in relation to the funding of the Health Department within the next 12 months. I think this is a simple, straightforward and easy solution, but the government doesn't appear to agree. So I maintain my position. I ask members to support the amendment, and I ask for the appel.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier. The vote's still open for those who've just come in. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announced amendment has been rejected. 14 votes pour, 28 votes contra, and 1 abstention. Now I'll move on to the 11th amendment. Now, in relation to this amendment, Minister for Social Security, I think you wish to ask the Assembly's leave to reduce the lodging period in relation to your second amendment. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct, sir, and withdraw the original amendment that I made.
Yes. Is that seconded? Does anyone wish to speak on that proposal? Those in favour kindly show. Thank you very much. The lodging period is reduced. Deputy Doublé, I think it's your panel's amendment.
Yes,
Is
sir,
that right?
it is.
Are you content for the amendment to be read as amended by the Minister's second amendment?
Yes, sir, the panel is accepting this amendment.
Thank you very much. I invite the greffier to read the 11th amendment as amended by the Minister's second amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B12, after the words in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 90, after the words, the state's grant will revert to its formula value from 2030 onwards, there should be inserted the words, the Minister for Social Security further commits to providing options for those who have achieved a full contribution record prior to reaching pensionable age to ensure a fair deal for the individuals affected and will bring forward proposals by the end of 2026.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir, and I want to open by thanking Deputy Stevenson for bringing this issue to the panel for consideration at one of our panel meetings, and I believe that she was approached by a constituent who she was trying to help, and she explained this issue to the panel, and the panel took it quite seriously and examined the detail of it and decided to lodge this amendment. I'm grateful to the Deputy, I'm grateful to the panel. I'm also grateful to the Minister, and there has been a bit of backwards and forwards on this, but what the panel realised is ultimately that the Minister does take this issue very seriously. I will speak very briefly, sir, because this amendment has been agreed by the panel, so I'm not expecting a very long debate. The issue is that there are some in Jersey who have paid all of their social security contributions, and I believe it's 45 years of contributions that we're required to pay in Jersey in order to draw a full state's pension. And this is compared to 35 years in the UK, so it's already quite a long period of time. And there are some islanders who may have been working from quite an early age of 15, 16 and have been paying their social security contributions for the 45 years, yet haven't reached the retirement age. And at the moment, the way the law is written that they're not able to draw their pension early or to stop paying the contributions. We didn't want to prescribe a specific solution to this because there might be many different ways of doing it. So we have managed to come to an agreed wording with the Minister that means she will look at this issue and ensure that a fair deal for the individuals affected is brought forward by the end of 2026. I think it's around 50 individuals who are affected by this. I think I've covered everything, but I also wanted to thank the panel's officers, which I haven't actually had an opportunity to do yet because our other amendments, which were mainly to the Health Minister on the women's health and other matters, have been accepted. But I think we cannot, I cannot understate how grateful I am and how grateful the panel is to our officers in the graph and in scrutiny for helping us to prepare this. They have been absolutely fantastic and so hard working, and we're very grateful to them. I make the amendment, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded? Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment, the 11th amendment? Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir, and I will be very brief. I just wanted to add my thanks to the Minister and her team for working on this, and my fellow panel members as well, and really just send a message to the public, really, that it does show that if you have an issue, go and speak to your elected representatives about it, not necessarily just because you may need a solution yourself, but it may highlight a matter which is important for a number of people in the community and actually can be taken forward. And I think it shows the process of how we represent our constituents really working in this case all the way through scrutiny, through working with ministers as well, and then here to a budget debate. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. And just for clarity, to correct the scrutiny chair, the maximum period of years to pay into the scheme is 47, not 45. It was changed a number of years ago. So normal retirement age now is 67, not 65.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I will be very brief. I did want to extend my thanks to the panel for working with me to come to a form of wording that enables me to continue with the work that we are doing. The chair of the panel is correct that we estimate that there may well be around 50 people in the current situation where they may well have a full pension record but will still be paying their social security contributions, which does of course enable them to have working age benefits. So the work that we are undertaking is to look at what flexibility we may be able to provide, given that we have an older population and that may wish to continue working into retirement age as well. So I thank the panel and I encourage the Assembly to accept this amendment.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Accordingly, I call upon Deputy Dooley to reply.
Thank you to those who have spoken. I agree with what Deputy Stevenson said about people approaching states members and asking for help, because it really does make a difference, especially when you have a minister who does listen to the parish deputies and to the scrutiny panel and really works to find solutions. And I'm grateful for that constructive work, as always. Ask for the appel, please, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce the amendment has been adopted unanimously, 43 votes for. I'll move on to the 36th amendment, which the Treasury Minister is entitled to propose without notice, understanding order 80A.
Sir, I think aside, as well as Amendment 36, I'm afraid this afternoon I've lodged a rather late amendment to the draft finance law. We've discovered an error.
It's a very small amendment.
It's very small. We're changing, the law refers to Article 52 and I think it should refer to 53. But I apologise to members that hasn't been picked up sooner. It's purely a cross-referencing error, so I'd be grateful for members' approval to accept that being submitted late.
We'll come to that one when we come to the law. We'll deal with the 36th Amendment first, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 3, paragraph B8. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5, 1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 5.1, the heads of expenditure shall be reduced in accordance with the table below. Cabinet Office, £9,000, Digital Services, £17,000, People Services, £6,000, Education and Lifelong Learning, £122,000, Children and Families, £94,000, Employment, Social Security and Housing, £24,000, Infrastructure, £30,000, Environment, £6,000, Health and Care Jersey, £180,000, Justice and Home Affairs, £25,000, States of Jersey Police, £15,000, Ministry of External Relations, £2,000, Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, £18,000, Financial Services, £6,000, Treasury and Exchequer, £37,000, and Central Reserve, £65,000.
Minister for Treasury and Resources.
Thank you, sir. Sir, this proposition has been lodged as a direct response to the Assembly's approval of Amendments 23 and 32 earlier this week. This now ensures that the Consolidated Fund remains in a positive position across all 4 years of the plan while delivering the additional funding for the Environment and States of Jersey Police. This proposition spreads the cost across the government, with 50% being met by a proportionate reduction in all departmental revenue expenditure budgets and 50% being met by a reduction in new revenue growth. While this may appear to some a somewhat blunt instrument, in the short amount of time, it was the fairest way to ensure that the Assembly's decision can be applied while maintaining balanced books and diluting the impact across all departments. I'm hoping that this debate will be short, as this amendment intends to patch up the public finances while honouring the previous decisions this week. There are an almost infinite number of ways that we could spread these reductions, but given that the reduction is 0.09% of total expenditure, ministers accept, somewhat grudgingly in some quarters, I have to say, that this allocation is fair and reasonable, and tinkering further would not be a good use of time. If this amendment isn't approved, we will potentially be passing an unbalanced position to the next government to fix. We should not be kicking that can down the road. Sir, I urge all members to accept this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the 36th Amendment? Deputy Tadier.
I think it does merit some comments, sir, even though it's been presented by the Treasury Minister as that this is an inevitable consequence of previous decisions that have been made. The first thing to say is that those decisions have been made by the whole Assembly, and it's because the government's acquiesced on certain amendments. I think it's fair to say because they thought they knew they wouldn't win them otherwise, they would be on the losing side of the argument. And if this proposition was just being presented before to the Assembly, it would have been scrutinised. So these cuts to each department haven't been scrutinised. I think that's the first point to make. And if they had been presented before the budget and been laid for the requisite amount of time, each of the scrutiny panels would have had something to say about them. And we might say, for example, well, how do we know that the pro rata rate across the board is the best way to pay for these? How do we know that actually the education budget shouldn't be giving up more? Or how do we know that the economic development department shouldn't be getting less, etc.? And we've not had an opportunity to do that, especially given the fact that certain other amendments have been pre-agreed, like the ring fencing for certain funds, which I won't go into, but we don't know whether there was already fat in some of that ring fencing, which actually won't be spent in the first place. So I think I'm not saying that I'll be voting against this, because of course I'll be criticised by the Treasury Minister, who says, well, you voted to give more money to the environment. But I think it has to be said that this hasn't been scrutinised, and it's probably not a great way to do politics. The last thing I would say, sir, is maybe something for the general debate, but the question of whether we're a debating chamber or not, we have been doing a lot of debating, but the debates themselves have not had any outcomes on the actual results of the debate. Nothing's been won or lost during these amendments by debate. The actual amendments have been agreed before the debates have happened, and that's happened by consent, with ministers, as I've said, recognising that they don't have the numbers, therefore talking to the movers of the propositions either to accept or amend, and therefore the debates that we're having have been fairly meaningless in a sense that they're there to provide the due diligence, but of course we've got to be careful that we tell the public that actually we listen to debates and make our decisions on that basis. That isn't the way this assembly works, it's just done on pure arithmetic. So I'll leave those slightly pessimistic comments for the Treasury Minister to decide whether she wants to consider them in summing up. But I think they were necessary to say, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon the Treasury Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. I'm not quite sure how to respond to those comments. Deputy Taddy says there hasn't been a lack of scrutiny. Scrutiny has crawled over this budget, and they produced a 150-page report, which has led to some, I think it's about 150 pages, which has led to a number of amendments. And yes, we have accepted those amendments because that was clearly the will of the Assembly. What did you think was going to happen? We don't have extra money, so if we are going to give money to environment, then a source has to be found. And we cannot, unless we do our budget debating in October, to allow time for amendments on the day to be scrutinised, we are never going to get through a process. And I mean, this is, what, third, fourth budget I've sat in, every single one, amendments have been brought forward that have been either accepted by government and not debated, or they've been rejected and debated. And I just don't know what kind of, his deputy seems to be suggesting some kind of root and branch review of our budget process, how that would look. I don't know. If he wants to bring some suggestions, I'm sure a future government would consider them. We have debated these changes. We debated at length the need for more money for the environment, and it was very clear, I thought, that there was more money going to the States of Jersey Police, so we've accepted that. But there are consequences. We do not have money sitting around waiting to be spent. So the money has to come from somewhere. We have found an easy way. We looked at a number of options as to how it can be split. This was the fairest way, which means that all government departments take a share. It is a small amount of money. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds, and some of them we're talking about 2, 3, 4 very small sums of money. Some departments, yes, are taking a much bigger share, but that's because they are much bigger departments and clearly have much bigger budgets. There is really no other way of doing this before the end of the year, I suspect, and it is something that has to be done before the end of the year. But like every other decisions we just talked about over the course of the day, there are consequences to decisions we make, and the consequence of the decision is that all other departments are taking a small cut in budget. So I don't really think I can say any more, sir, and I call for the appel. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have been able to cast their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 38 votes pour, 4 votes contra.
Can we have the floor, please, sir?
Yes.
Those members voting contre, Deputies Tadier, Miles, Andrews and Wilson.
That completes the amendments. So we now resume debate on the budget as amended. Does anyone wish to speak on the budget as amended? Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. I know it's getting on, but I think I need to say a few words if members will crave members' indulgence. That won't take too long. There's been a lot of commentary on this budget. Some of it good, sir, some of it not so good, but most of it incorrect or misleading. However, I just wanted to remind members, sir, that it's been almost 6 years since the pandemic began. 6 years since the moment many of us will not forget, when lives were disrupted, the economy stalled, and extraordinary public intervention became essential to protect our community. In any normal cycle, we would have expected a period of recovery by now, a rebuilding of the public finances, a return to economic growth, and a steady ratcheting down of exceptional spending. But that is not the world we are living in. We have only just emerged from the grip of the most severe inflation spike in a generation, one that has hit households and businesses hard and demanded extended government support. Economic growth remains slow across Europe. Geopolitical risks are elevated, and while Jersey is stronger than many, we are not immune to the forces around us. That, sir, is the backdrop of this budget. The Council of Ministers serves at the behest of this Assembly to lead a government which, by design and by mandate, must take a balanced and pragmatic approach as we work to improve the lives of islanders, sir. This budget, sir, reflects that approach. There is no sudden withdrawal of support from islanders, still feeling the effects of the pandemic and of inflation. There is no lurch to higher taxes that would weigh down businesses and the economy when demand remains uncertain. There is no reckless drawdown of our reserves, sir. The reserves are indeed the foundation of our resilience and our strong credit rating. Some will criticise us for not being more radical, but leadership demands judgment, and in our judgment, sir, that radical approach is not what the island needs right now. This budget is clear in its purpose and confident in its direction. It does 4 things. Firstly, sir, it supports islanders through a challenging period. Secondly, it invests at a scale in the services and infrastructure that underpin the quality of life. Thirdly, it protects the strength and resilience of our public finances for the years ahead. Fourth, sir, it signals our serious commitment to fiscal discipline and sustainability. For many years, certainly since before 2019, Jersey enjoyed a position of privilege, sir, and we still do. We could keep taxes low then and expand public spending to leave our fiscal reserves untouched. We could, as the saying goes, sir, have our cake and eat it, and we did for many, many years. We now understand why that approach was possible. Deputy Gorst's competitiveness review shows that exceptional corporate tax revenues from financial and professional services enabled that period. And we now understand what we got wrong. And the investing in Jersey proposals remind us that we, for many years, so for decades probably, underinvested in our infrastructure, a situation that is simply not sustainable for the future. So let me be very clear. That privileged position has shifted across every part of our public finances. Since taking office, I've consistently said that the size and growth of government spending was unsustainable. Our leadership team, including the Chief Executive, has warned that the fiscal position is challenging. It's not a crisis, but a real risk wait, sir, if we fail to act. That is why we are curbing the growth in public expenditure. And there is evidence of that, sir. And I refer to a comment, the comment P to Amendment 35, sir, which shows that revenue growth has slowed from 53 million in 2023, 59 million in 2024, 33 million in 2025, 50 million in 2026. That's not where we want to be, but it is an important start, sir. We are curbing growth in public expenditure through efficiency savings, reduced reliance on external consultants, consolidation of the government estate, and recruitment restrictions. For the first time in many years, this budget lays down a credible financial path built on disciplined spending and prudent investment and realistic borrowing. We are no longer operating as if public spending has no limits. This budget helps protect Jersey from fiscal risk while prioritising health, children's services, education, infrastructure, early years, and prevention. It becomes a bridge, sir, to prosperity, connecting the needs of today with a stable and sustainable future. It is a start. Many households continue to feel the impact of high prices, rising interest rates, and wider uncertainty. And this budget responds directly. Personal tax allowance rises, putting more money into the pockets of working islanders. Support for pensioners expands, recognising a lifetime of contribution, but we need to go further. Investment in early years, children's services and preventative healthcare, helping families earlier and more effectively. These are practical actions that ensure a child receives the best start in life, that a parent can balance work and care, and older islanders can live with dignity and in good health. Between 2026 and 2029, we commit around £1 billion to renewing Jersey's infrastructure and improving public services. This will deliver modern new hospital facilities and digital health systems, and I commend the Health Minister and the team for pushing this through and not relenting on the efforts this area needs to achieve that. Better schools and youth and children's facilities, a renewed Fort Regent and improved cultural, community and sporting venues, upgraded water, drainage, transport and digital infrastructure, sir, and public realm. Through the Investing in Jersey programme and the Capital Investment Fund, we are ending this stop-start approach to infrastructure and giving businesses and islanders confidence that long-promised projects will be delivered. That is what long-term government looks like, protecting strong and sustainable public finances. And I remind members again that there is an underlying risk if we don't get it right. General revenue income is forecast to exceed spending while maintaining a strong strategic reserve, but that needs to grow. We are not writing cheques that our children will have to pay. We are focusing more on intergenerational fairness. This budget includes efficiencies that protect frontline services and targeted duties that support health and the environment while reducing draft beer duty to help hospitality and community venues. Taken together, these choices show a government willing to take difficult decisions, always in the long-term interest of the island. Before, sir, we finish the budget, a caution: this year there have been 35 amendments to this budget. Across this term, almost 130 amendments have been lodged. Had governments accepted most of them, public spending would now be at least £100 million higher. The underlying belief seems to be that the answer to every problem is more public spending, more subsidies, more government. And I do not believe that this is the route to higher living standards. I am not stopped in the street every day by islanders demanding a bigger government, sir. Never has that happened. We have to, all of us, come to our senses a little bit. We are spending like a big country. We are regulating like a big country. We are centralising like a big country. We are in danger of borrowing like a big country. We are a small island. This is not who we are, and this is not who we should become. Budgets are not just ledgers. They are reflections of what we all stand for. This budget says we believe children deserve the best possible start. Healthcare must be accessible, modern and sustainable. Our infrastructure must serve the next generation. Our economy must stay competitive and innovative. Government must live within its means. It is aligned with our common strategic policy and our commitment to a strong economy, strong services and strong public finances. This budget may not be perfect. None ever are, but it is the right budget for the times we are in. It supports households under pressure, it invests in the future of our island, it strengthens our public finances, it sets a pathway to prosperity for generations to come, but it is just a start, and it's a somewhat fragile start, and it needs to be built upon. It's a budget, sir, not built for the next headline, but for the next generation. Before I hand over to the Treasury Minister, sir, can I thank ministers, assistant ministers, and indeed all members for their engagement in this budget. It's been a tough week. There's been some tough debates. There's been some good debates and some not so good, sir, but I would commend every member for their engagement and interest and participation. This Assembly, sir, wins on democracy, and I think we've exercised our privilege of democracy very well this week indeed. I'd also like to thank all of the officials for their support and the huge amount of work that has gone on, not just government officials, scrutiny officials as well, and the scrutiny teams. When we work together, although we don't always disagree, I don't think it's disagreeable, and we all work for the best interests of the island, sir. So I'd like to thank members for all they've put into this and hand over to the Treasury Minister, sir. If no other members, well, perhaps after Sir Philip Balash, who has his light on. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
To speak, yes. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. And I was trying desperately to restrain myself, but I do feel that it's necessary to respond to some of the comments of the Chief Minister there. It was good to hear that he hasn't forgotten about the resourceful nature of Jersey and the small state preferences of the public who are out there on King Street and Queen Street and worrying about what is going to happen next year and the years to come. But I'm afraid, sir, that he has had 22 months to deliver a different vision for the island and to set a different path for the public finances of the island. And what he has left us with is an unsustainable, precarious position that is when I believe there was a panel discussion about this budget last week, and the panellists were asked to give a one-word view of the budget. The chair of the IOD said it was concerning. A former senator, perhaps a future one as well, said it was tin can. The chair of the PAC said it was short term. Sir, I don't think he is setting us in on a good path for the future. I think there is an extreme amount of work to be done, a new vision to be delivered, if we are going to give the public of this island a sustainable future and to restore the fragile position that sadly he has left us in.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Balash.
Sir, I have been a member of this Assembly for more than 50 years, but this is the first time that I have felt unhappy about the stewardship of the island's financial affairs and the direction in which the government is taking the island. It's the first time, indeed, that I have felt inclined to vote against a budget. Deputy Renouf said in an earlier debate that the government had thrown a hand grenade into the lap of its successor. I think the deputy was wrong. It is not a hand grenade, it is a mortar bomb. And the destructive effects of that mortar bomb are quite extensive. Let's look at the figures. What will the next government have to find in extra revenue just to keep going? The raid upon the Social Security Fund is £50 million a year for the next 4 years. All that money is being spent on recurring expenditure. Indeed, the Fiscal Policy Panel states that the additional departmental spend, growth allocations, is 53 million for 2026, growing to 67 million in 2029. The Fort Regent borrowing, despite the minister's aspirations, is likely to lead to recurring annual expenditure on maintaining and operating such a huge commercial enterprise. Let's say conservatively £5 million. If one takes a borrowing figure of £110 million, which seems to me inevitable if the fort is to be open by 2028 or 2029, annual expenditure on interest and capital will be at least £8 million. The hospital borrowing incurs interest payments alone of £15 million in 2026, rising to £28 million in 2028. The additional revenue costs are already more than £100 million a year. That's the mortar bomb. It's been delivered to the next government against a background of a warning from the FPP that the trajectory is unsustainable. The FPP states that it is crucial that the balance sheet and reserves are rebuilt. It can only be achieved, they say, by limiting growth in day-to-day spending and reducing borrowing. It's right to emphasise, as the Chief Minister correctly did, that we are not in crisis because we still have substantial reserves. But over the last 3 years, 2022 to 2025, our income has grown by 22%, while our day-to-day spending grew by 49%. Spending has soared since the pandemic. Our debt in 2026 will be 1.3 billion. The Chief Minister has claimed that this is a budget for stability, but I'm afraid that is an optimistic claim. The Treasury Minister issued a challenge to members to find solutions. She said, not unfairly, that all members do is spend more money and call for services that involve more spending. And the Chief Minister said that if all the amendments had been adopted, another £100 million would have been added to the cost of the island's expenditure. It was noteworthy, I thought, that Deputy Mezek claimed pride in 3 achievements, he said. The increase in the minimum wage, additional support in relation to childcare, and changes to the landlord and tenant legislation, all of which involve substantial extra spending or financial burdens on members of the public. So I would respond to the Treasury Minister's challenge in this way. Every member knows that the answer is to cut spending and that will be painful. This government has, I'm afraid, failed in that aspiration. but the next one must not. It's the only way in which to put the economy back into balance. So what would I do? I would ask that what should the government do, the next government do? The next government should give the chief executive a mandate to cut expenditure by at least £100 million a year. He needs the authority to make difficult decisions, and that authority can only come from the government. Secondly, the government should give a direction to departmental chief officers to reduce their headcount by 10% in the next 18 months. If they fail to do that, they would clearly not be the people for the job and should give way to someone else. Such a reduction would involve difficult political choices, so that if a department failed, the minister should go too. A 10% reduction needs to be viewed against the fact that the headcount has risen by some 20% during the last 4 to 5 years. If we were capable of running our economy with that fewer number of people before the pandemic, then we should be able to do so now. Sorry?
Nothing.
Would the member give way?
You prepared to give way, Deputy?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just wondering if this is his party policy or if it's just suggestions for the next government, and I'd be interested to know, because I think both would be helpful to know whether this is what we can expect from an advanced party government in future, sir.
I'm speaking on the budget, sir, and I'm speaking on what I believe the next government should do. At the outset, sir, I would not exempt any department, even the Health and Education Department, from that mandate. Maybe there would be adjustments agreed around the table of the Council of Ministers, but the overall number of reductions should be achieved. Thirdly, I would expect the government to take a hard look at ALOs, which involve funding by taxpayers. Their number has mushroomed in recent years. Many do a very good job, but if there is scope for pruning, it should be done. Only in the most highly exceptional circumstances should any new arm's-length organisation be allowed to come into existence. And fourthly, the Council of Ministers should get a grip on regulation. Every government in Europe, even the European Union itself, is trying to do that. Regulation costs money. And if a new law or regulation is necessary, there should be a ministerial direction to lawyers and law drafters to keep it simple. The complexity of much of our legislation is mind-boggling. It's not necessary to copy reams of stuff from United Kingdom acts. Civil servants should be directed to use their skills to promote Jersey-centric, short legislation. So those are some ideas for the next government. I hope that at least some are adopted. I believe the next government should be resolute, but should obviously at the same time be careful and thoughtful.
Thank you, Deputy. I think there's a fine for the Connaught wasn't saver for your phone, is that right?
Yes, my apologies, sir. Possibly the last donation of this term, sir.
I hope so.
Call for the lunch break, sir. Well, the sandwich
Oh,
break.
it is the late lunch, then we'll have Deputy Miles.
Sir, if I may, it was just to say I'm going to have to advise members that I won't be able to continue the assembly. It is, I have to say, my daughter's birthday, and I do have to go to her birthday dinner this evening, so I do apologise.
my son's birthday as well, actually, but there we are. there we are. Right. So should we adjourn for exactly half an hour?